Tremniers, huge, of the Lord Spitfire's besieging of the witches in his own castle of Owlswick, and how he did. Battle against Corinius. Under Thremniers huge, and the mean of Witchland won the day. Lord Spitfire sat in his pavilion before Owlswick in mickle discontent. A brazier of hot coals made a pleasant warmth within, and lights filled the rich tent with splendor. From without came the noise of rain, steadily falling in the dark autumn night, splashing in the puddles, pattering on the silken roof. Zig sat by Spitfire on the bed, his hawk-like countenance shadowed with an unwonted look of care. His sword stood between his knees, point downward on the floor. He tipped it gently with either hand, now to the left, now to the right, watching with pensive gaze the warm light shift and gleam in the ball of ballast ruby that made the pommel of the sword. "Fell it out so accursedly," said Spitfire. "Or 10, thou saidst, on Ramaric strands?" Zig nodded assent. "Where was he that he saved them not?" said Spitfire. "Oh, it was vilely miscarried," Zig answered. "'Twas a swift and secret landing in the dark, a mile east of the harbour. Thou must not blame him unheard." "What more remain to us?" said Spitfire. "Content, I'll hear him." "What ships remain to us is more to the purpose. 3 by North Sands Eries, below Elmstead, 5 on Throwater, 2 by Likeness, 2 moored at Orwath, 6 by my direction on Stroppadon Firth, 7 here on the beach. Besides 4 at the Firth head in Westmark," said Zig. "And order is Tarin for more in the Isles." 29, said Spitfire, "and those in the Isles beside, and not one afloat, nor can be ere spring. If Laxus smell them out, and take them as lightly as these, he burned under Voller's nose on Ramaric strands, we do but plough the desert building them." He rose to pace the tent. "Thou must raise me new forces for to break into Owlswick. For heaven," he said, "this vexes me to the guts. To sit at mine own gate full 2 months like a beggar, whilst Corsus and those 2 cubs his sons drink themselves drunk within, and play at cockshies with my treasures." "Oh, the wrong side of the wall," said Zig. "The master builder may judge the excellence of his own building." Spitfire stood by the brazier, spreading his strong hands above the glow. After a time, he spake more soberly. "It is not these few ships burnt in the north should trouble me. And indeed, Laxus hath not 500 men to man his whole fleet withal. But he holdeth the sea, and ever since his putting out into the deep, with 30 sail from Looking Haven, I do expect fresh succours out of Witchland. 'Tis that maketh me champ still on the bit, till this hold be won again, for then were we free at least to meet their landing. But 'twere most unfit at this time of the year to carry on a siege in low and watery grounds, the enemy's army being on foot and unengaged. Wherefore, this is my mind, O my friend, that thou go with haste over the stile, and fetch me supply of men. Leave force to ward our ships a building, wheresoever they be, and a good force in Grothering and thereabout, for I will not be found a false steward of his lady sister's safety. And in thine own house make sure. But these things being provided, shear up the war arrow, and bring me out of the west 15 or 1800 men-at-arms. For I do think that by me and thee, and such a head of men of Demonland, as we shall then command Owlswick gates, may be brast open, and Corsus plucked out. Of Owlswick, like a wilk out of his shell? Zig answered him, I'll be gone at appointed day. Now they rose up, and took their weapons, and muffled themselves in their great campaigning cloaks, and went forth with torch-bearers to walk through the lines. As every night, ere he went to rest, it was Spitfire's wont to do, visiting his captains and setting the guard. The rain fell gentlier. The night was without a star. The wet sands gleamed with the lights of Owlswick Castle, and from the castle came by fits the sound of feasting, heard above the wash and moan of the sullen, sleepless sea. When they had made all sure, and were come nigh again to Spitfire's tent, and Zig was upon saying good night, there rose up out of the shadow of the tent an ancient man, and came betwixt them into the glare of the torches. Shrivelled and wrinkled and bowed, he seemed as with extreme age. His hair and his beard hung down in elf locks, adrip with rain. His mouth was toothless, his eyes like a dead fish's eyes. He touched Spitfire's cloak with his skinny hand, saying in a voice like the night raven's, "Spitfire, beware of Thremnir's hue." Spitfire said, "What have we here? And which way the devil came he into my camp?" But that aged man still held him by the cloak, saying, "Spitfire, is not this thine house of Owlswick? And is it not the most strong and fair place that ever man saw in this country?" "Filth, unhand me," said Spitfire, "else shall I presently thrust thee through with my sword and send thee to the Tartarus of hell, where I doubt not the devils there too long await thee." But that aged man said again, "Hot stirring heads are too easily entrapped. Hold fast, Spitfire, to that which is thine, and beware of Thremnir's hue." Now was Lord Spitfire wood angry, and because the old carle still held him by the cloak and would not let him go, plucked forth his sword, thinking to have stricken him about the head with the flat of his sword. But with that stroke went a gust of wind about them, so that the torch flames were nigh blown out. And that was strange of a still windless night. And in that gust was the old man vanished away like a cloud passing in the night. Zig spake, "The thin habit of spirits is beyond the force of weapons." "Pish," said Spitfire. "Was this a spirit? I hold it rather a simulacrum or illusion prepared for us by Witchland's cunning to darken our counsel and shake our resolution." On the morrow, while yet sunrise was red, Lord Zig went down to the seashore to bathe in the great rock pools that face southward across the little bay of Owlswick. The salt air was fresh after the rain. The wind that had veered to the east blew in cold and pinching gusts. In a rift between slate-blue clouds, the low sun flamed blood, red. Far to the southeast, where the waters of Micklefirth open on the main, the low cliffs of Lookinghavenness loomed shadowy as a bank of cloud. Zig laid down his sword and spear and looked southeast across the firth, and behold, a ship in full sail rounding the Ness and steering northward on the larboard tack. And when he had put off his kirtle, he looked again, and behold, 2 more ships a-steering round the Ness and sailing hard in the wake of the first. So he donned his kirtle again and took his weapons, and by then were 15 sailors steering up the firth in line ahead, dragons of war. So he fared hastily to Spitfire's tent, and found him yet abed, for sweet sleep yet nursed in her bosom impetuous. Spitfire, his head was thrown back on the broidered pillow, displaying his strong shaven throat and chin. His fierce mouth beneath his bristling fair mustachios was relaxed in slumber, and his fierce eyes closed in slumber beneath their yellow bristling eyebrows. Zig took him by the foot and waked him, and told him all the matter. 15 ships, and every ship, as I might plainly see as they drew nigh, as full of men as there be eggs in a herring's roe. So cometh our expectation to the birth. And so, said Spitfire, leaping from the couch, cometh Laxus again to demon land, with fresh meat to glut our swords withal. He caught up his weapons, and ran to a little knoll that stood above the beach, over against Owlswick Castle. And all the host ran to behold those dragons of war sail up the firth at dawn of day. They douse sail, said Spitfire, and put in for Scaramzee. 'Tis not for nothing. I taught these Witchlanders on the rapes of Brima. Laxus, since he witnessed that downthrow of their army, now accounteth islands more wholesomer than the mainland, well knowing we have nor sails nor wings to strike across the firth at him. Yet scarcely by skulking in the islands shall he break up the siege of Owlswick. Zig said, I would know where be his 15 other ships. In 15 ships, said Spitfire, it is not possible he beareth more than 1600 or 1700 men of war. Against so many I am strong enough today, should they adventure a landing, to throw him into the sea and still contain courses if he make a sally. If more be added, I am the less secure. Therefore occasion calleth, but the louder for thy purposed faring to the west. So the Lord Zig called him out 12 men at arms and went a horseback. By then were all the ships rowed ashore under the southern spit of Scaramsay, where is good anchorage for ships. They were there hidden from view, all save their masts that showed over the spit, so that the demons might observe naught of their disembarking. Spitfire rode with Zig 3 miles or 4, as far as the brow of the descent to the fords of Ethrewater, and there bade him farewell. Lightning shall be slow to my hasting, said Zig, till I be back again. Meantime, I would have thee be not too scornfully unmindful of that old man. Chirking of sparrows, said Spitfire, I have forgot his brabble. Nevertheless, his glance shifted southward beyond Owlswick to the great bluff of tree-hung precipice that stands like a sentinel above the meadows of lower Tiveranderdale, leaving but a narrow way betwixt its lowest crags and the sea. He laughed. O my friend, I am yet a boy in thine eyes, it seemeth, albeit I am well nigh 29 years old. Laugh at me, an thou wilt, said Zig. Without this word said I could not leave thee. Well, said Spitfire, to lull thy fears, I'll not go a bird's nesting on Fremnia's Heugh till thou come back again. Now for a week or more was naught to tell of save that Spitfire's army sat before Owlswick, and they on the island sent ever and again 3 or 4 ships to land, suddenly about Lookinghaven, or at the head of the firth, or south away beyond Drapaby, as far as the coastlands under Remor Armor, harrying and burning. And as oft as force was gathered against them, they fared aboard again, and sailed back to Scaramsay. In those days came Vol from the west with 100 men, and joined him with Spitfire. The 8th day of November, the weather worsened, and clouds gathered from the west and south, till all the sky was a welter of huge, watery, leaden clouds, separated one from another by oily streaks of white. The wind grew fitful as the day wore. The sea was dark like dull iron. Rain began to fall in big drops. The mountains showed monstrous and shadowy, some dark inky blue, others in the west like walls and bastions of clotted mist against the hueless mist of heaven behind them. Evening closed with thunder and rain and lightning, torn banks of vapour. All night long the thunder roared in sullen intermission, and all night long new banks of thunderclouds swung together and parted and swung together again. And the light of the moon was abated, and no light seen save the levin brand, and the campfires before Owlswick, and the light of revelry within, so that the demons camped before the castle were not aware of those 15 ships that put out from Scaramsay on that wild sea, and landed 2 or 3 miles to the southward by the great bluff of Thremnia's Heugh. Nor were they ware at all of them that landed from the ships, 15 or 1600 men at arms, with Hemming of Witchland and his young brother Cargo for their leaders. And the ships rowed back to Scaramsay through the loud storm and fury of the weather, all save one that foundered in Bothry Sound. But on the morn When the tempest was abated, might all behold the putting forth of 14 ships of war from Scaramsae, every ship of them laden with men-at-arms. They had passage swiftly over the firth, and came a land 2 miles south of Owlswick. And the ships stood off again from the land, but the army marshalled for battle on the meads above Mingarn Hope. Now Lord Spitfire let draw up his men, and moved out southward from the lines before Owlswick. When they were come within some half-mile's distance of the Witchland army, so that they might see clearly, their russet kirtles and their shields and body armour of bronze, and the dull glint of their sword blades and the heads of their spears, Vor, that rode by Spitfire, spake and said, Markest thou him, O Spitfire, that rideth back and forth before their battle, marshalling them? So ever rode Corineus, and well mayest thou know him, even afar off by his showiness and jaunting carriage. Yet see a great wonder now, for who ever heard tell of this young Hotspur giving back from the fight? And now, or ever we be gotten within spear-shot? By the bright eye of day, cried Spitfire, 'tis so. Will he balk me quite of a battle? I'll loose a handful of horse upon them, to delay their haste ere they be flown beyond sight and finding. Therewith he gave command to his horsemen to ride forth upon the enemy. And they rode forth with Astar of Retre, that was brother-in-law to Lord Zig, for their leader. But the Witchland horse met them by the shallows of Arran Pal, and held them in the shallows, while Corineus with his main army won across the river. And when the main body of the demons were come up, and the passage forced, the Witchlanders were gotten clean away across the water meadows, to the pass betwixt the shore and the steeps of Thremnir's Heugh. Then, said Spitfire, they stay not to form even eyes the narrow way twixt the sea and the Heugh, and that were their safety, if they had but the heart to turn and stand us. And he shouted with a great shout upon his men to charge the enemy, and suffer not a witch to overlive that slaughter. So the footmen caught hold of the stirrup leathers of the horsemen, and running and riding they poured into the narrow pass, and ever was Spitfire foremost among his men, hewing to left and to right among the press, riding on that whelming battle-tide that seemed to bear him on to triumph. But now, on a sudden, was he, who with but 1,200 men had so hotly followed 1,500 into the strait passage under Thremnir's Heugh, made ware too late that he must have to do with 3,000, Corineus rallying his folk and turning like a wolf in the pass, while Corin's sons, that had landed as aforesaid in the storm, in the murk of night, swept down with their battalions from the wooded slopes behind the Heugh, in such wise that Spitfire wist not sooner of any foreshadowing of disaster than of disaster's self. The thunder of the blow in flank and front and rear, then befell great man-slaying between the sea-cliffs and the sea. The demons, taken at that advantage, were like a man tripped in mid-stride by a rope across the way. By the sore onset of the witches they were driven down into the shallows of the sea, and the spume of the sea was red with blood. And the Lord Corineus, now that he had done with feigned retreat, fared through the battle like a stream of unquenchable wildfire, that none might sustain his strokes that were about him. Now was Spitfire's horse slain under him with a spear thrust, as riding fetlock. Deep in the yielding sand he rallied his men to fling back hemming. But Bremery of Shores brought him another horse, and so mightily went he forth against the witches, that the sons of Corund were fain to give back before his onslaught. And that wing of the Witchland army was pressed back against the broken ground below the Heugh. Yet was that of little avail, for Corineus brake through from the north, thrusting the demons with great slaughter back from the sea, so that they were penned betwixt him and Emming. Therewith Spitfire turned with some picked companies against Corineus, and well it seemed for a while that a great force of the witches must be whelmed or drowned in the salt waves. And Corineus himself stood now in great peril of his life, for his horse was bowed in the soft sands and might not win free for all his plunging. In that nick of time came Spitfire through the stour, with a band of demons about him, slaying as he came. He shouted with a terrible voice, "O Corineus, hateful to me and mine as are the gates of hell, now will I kill thee, and thy dead carcass shall fatten the sweet meads of Owlswick." Corineus answered him, "Bloody Spitfire, last of 3 whelps, for thy brothers are by now dead and rotten, I shall give thee a choke pear." Therewith Spitfire shot a twirl spear at him. It missed the man, but smote the great horse in the shoulder, so that he plunged and fell in a heap, hurt to the death. But the Lord Corineus, lighting nimbly on his feet, caught Spitfire's horse by the bridle rein and smote it on the muzzle, even as he rode at him, so that the horse reared up and swerved. Spitfire made a great blow at him with an axe, but it came slantwise on the helmet ridge and glinted aside in air. Then Corineus thrust up under Spitfire's shield with his sword, and the point entered the big muscle of the arm near the armpit, and glancing against the bone, tore up through the muscles of the shoulder. And that was a great wound. Nevertheless, Spitfire slacked, not from the fight, but smote at him again, thinking to have hewn off his arm the hand whereof still clutched the bridle rein. Corineus caught the axe on his shield, but his fingers loosed the rein, and almost he fell to earth under that mighty stroke, and the good bronze shield was dented and battered in. Now with the loosing of the reins was Spitfire's horse plunged forward, carrying him past Corineus toward the sea. But he turned and hailed him, crying, "Get thee an horse, for I count it unworthy to fight with thee bearing this advantage over thee, I horseback, and thou on foot." Corineus cried out and answered, "Come down from thine horse then, and meet me foot to foot, and know it, my pretty throstle-cock, that I am king in demon land, which dignity I hold of the king of kings, goddess of witchland, mine only overlord. Meet it is that I show thee in combat. Singular, that vauntest thyself greatest among the rebels yet left alive in this my kingdom. How much greater is my might than thine?" "These be great and thumping words," said Spitfire. "I shall thrust them down thy throat again." Therewith he made as if to light down from his horse, but as he strove to light down, a mist went before his eyes, and he reeled in his saddle. His men rushed in betwixt him and Corineus, and the captain of his bodyguard bare him up, saying, "You are hurt, my lord. You must not fight no more with Corineus, for your highness is unmeet for fighting, and may not stand alone." So they that were about him bare up great Spitfire, and the melee that was stayed while those lords dealt together in single combat brake forth afresh in that place. But all the while had furious war swung and ravened below Thremnia's hue, and wondrous was the valour of the demons, for many hundred were slain or wounded to the death, and but a small force were they that yet remained to bear up the battle against the witches. Now those that were with Spitfire departed with him in the secretest manner that they could out of the fight, wrapping about him a watchet-coloured cloak to hide his shining armour. They staunched the blood that ran from the great wound in his shoulder, and bound it up carefully, and carried him a horseback by Vol's command into Tremedale, by secret mountain paths up to a desolate corrie east of Sterigab, under the great scree shoot that flanks the precipices of the south summit of Dina. A long time he lay there senseless, like to one dead, for many hurts had he taken in the unequal fight, and greatly was he bruised and battered, but worst of all was the sore hurt Corineus gave him ere they parted betwixt the limits of land and sea. And when night was fallen, and all the ways were darkened, came the Lord Vole with a few companions, utterly wearied, to that lonely corrie. The night was still and cloudless, and the maiden moon walked high heaven. blackening the shadows of the great peaks that were like sharks' teeth against the night. Spitfire lay on a bed of ling and cloaks in the lee of a great boulder. Ghastly pale was his face in the silver moonlight. Vol leaned upon his spear, looking earnestly upon him. They asked him tidings. And Vol answered, "All lost," and still looked upon Spitfire. They said, "My lord, we have staunched the blood and bound up the wound, but his lordship abideth yet senseless, and greatly we fear for his life, lest this great hurt yet prove his bane-sore." Vol kneeled beside him on the cold sharp stones and tended him as a mother might her sick child, applying to the wound leaves of black horehound and milfoil and other healing simples, and giving him to drink out of a flask of precious wine of Archaic, ripened for an age in the deep cellars below Crothering, so that in a while Spitfire opened his eyes and said, "Draw back the curtains of the bed, for 'tis many a day since I woke up in Owlswick. Or is it night indeed? How went the fight then?" His eyes stared at the naked rocks and the naked sky beyond them. Then, with a great groan, he lifted himself on his right elbow. Volley put a strong arm about him, saying, "Drink the good wine, and have patience. There be great doings toward." Spitfire stared round him a while, then said violently, "Shall we be foxes and fugitive men to dwell in holes of the hollow mountainside? So, the bright day is done, huh? Then off with these trammels." And he fell a-tearing at the bandage on his wounds. But Volley prevented him with strong hands, saying, "Bethink thee, how on thee alone, O glorious Spitfire, and on thy wise heart and valiant soul that delighteth in furious war, resteth all our hope to ward off from our lady-wives and dear children, and all our good land and fee the fury of the men of Witchland, and to save alive the great name of Demonland. Let not thy proud heart be capable of despair." But Spitfire groaned and said, "Certain it was that woe and evil hap must be to Demonland until my kinsman be gotten home again, and that day I think shall never dawn." And he cried, "Boasted he not that he is king in Demonland? And yet I had not my sword in his umbles, and thou thinkest I'll live in shame?" Therewithal he strove again to tear off the bandages, but Vol prevented him, and he raved and said, "Who was it forced me from the battle? 'Tis pity of his life to have abused me so. Better dead than run from Carinius like a beaten puppy. Let me go, false traitors. I will amend this. I will die fighting." "Let me go back." Vol said, "Lift up thine eyes, great Spitfire, and behold the Lady Moon, how virgin free she walketh the wide fields of heaven, and the glory of the stars of heaven, which in their multitudes attend her. And as little as earthly mists and storms do dim her, but though she be hid a while, yet when the tempest is abated, and the sky swept bare of clouds, there she appeareth again in her steadfast course, mistress of tides and seasons, and swear of the fates of mortal men. Even such is the glory of sea-girt Demonland, and the glory of thine house, O Spitfire. And as little as commotions in the heavens should avail to remove these everlasting mountains, so little availeth disastrous war, though it be a great fight lost as was today, to shake down our greatness, that are mightiest with the spear from of old, and able to make all earth bow to our glory." So said Volley. And the Lord Spitfire looked out across the mist-choked sleeping valley to the great rock faces dim in the moonlight, and the lean peaks grand and silent beneath the moon. He spake not, whether for strengthlessness or as charmed to silence by the mighty influences of night and the mountain solitudes, and by Vol's voice speaking deep and quiet in his ear, like the voice of night herself, calming earth-born tumults and despairs. After a time, Vole spake once more, Thy brethren shall come home again, doubt it not. But till then art thou our strength. Therefore have patience, heal thy wounds, and raise forces again. But shouldst thou in desperate madness destroy thy life, then were we shent indeed. King Corineus of the entry of the Lord, Corineus into Alswick, and how he was crowned in Spitfire's sapphire chair, as Viceroy of Goris, the King and King in Demonland, and how A.L. that were in Owlswick Castle did so receive and acknowledge him. Corineus, having completed this great victory, came with his army north again to Owlswick as daylight began to fade. The drawbridge was let down for him, and the great gates flung wide, that were studded with silver and ribbed with adamant. And in great pomp rode he and his into Owlswick Castle, over the causey builded of the living rock and great blocks of hewn granite out of Tremerdale. The more part of his army lay in Spitfire's camp before the castle, but 1,000 were with him in his entry into Owlswick, with Coran's sons and the lords Grow and Laxus. Besides, for the fleet had put across to anchor there when they saw the day was won. Corsus greeted them well, and would have brought them to their lodgings near his own chamber, that they might put off their harness and don clean linen and festival garments before supper. But Corineus excused himself, saying he had eat naught since breakfast time. Let us therefore not pass for ceremony, but bring us, I pray you, forthright to the banquet house. Corineus went in with Corsus before them all, putting lovingly about his shoulder, his arm all befouled with dust and clotted blood. For he had not so much as stayed for washing of his hands, and that was scarce good for the broidered cloak of purple taffety the Duke Corsus wore about his shoulders. Howbeit, Corsus made as if he marked it not. When they were come into the hall, Corsus looked about him and said, So it is, my lord Corineus, that this hall is something little for the great press that here befalleth. Many of mine own folk that be of some account should by long custom sit down with us, and here be no seats left for them. Prithee, command some of the common sort that came in with thee to give place, that all may be done orderly. Mine officers must not scramble in the buttery. I am sorry, my lord, answered Corineus, but needs must that we bethink us, O these lads of mine which have chiefly borne the toil of battle. And well I weet thou'lt not deny them this honour, to sit at meat with us, these that thou hast most to thank for opening Owlswick gates and raising the siege hour, enemies held so long against you. So they took their seats, and supper was set before them, kids stuffed with walnuts and almonds and pistachios, herons in sauce cameline, chines of beef, geese and bustards, and great beakers and jars of ruby-hearted wine. Right fain of the good banquet were Corineus and his folk, and silence was in the hall for a while, save for the clatter of dishes and the champing of the mouths of the feasters. At length Corineus, quaffing down at one draught a mighty goblet of wine, spake and said, There was battle in the meads by Thremmir's Heugh to-day, my lord Duke. Wast thou at that battle? Corsus's heavy cheeks flushed somewhat red. He answered, Thou knowest I was not, and I should account it most blamable hot-headedness to have sallied forth when it seemed Spitfire had the victory. O my lord, said Corineus, think not I made this a quarrel to thee. The rather let me show thee how much I hold thee in honour. Therewith he called his boy that stood behind his chair, and the boy returned anon with a diadem of polished gold, set all about with topazes that had passed through the fire, and on the frontlet of that diadem was the small figure of a crabfish in dull iron, the eyes of it 2 green beryls on stalks of silver. The boy set it down on the table before the lord Corineus, as it had been a dish of meat before him. Corineus took a writing from his purse, and laid it on the table for Corsus to see. And there was the signet upon it of the Worm Ouroboros in scarlet wax, and the sign manual of Goris the king. "My lord Corsus," said he, "and ye sons of Corsus, and ye other witches, I do you to wit that our lord the king made me by these tokens his viceroy for his province of Demonland, and willed that I should bear a king's name in this land, and that under him all should render me obedience." Corsus, looking on the crown and the royal warrant of the king, waxed in one instant deadly pale, and in the next red as blood. Corineus said, "To thee, O Corsus, out of all these great ones that here be gathered together in Owlswick, will I submit me for thee to crown me with this crown as king in Demonland. This, that thou mayest see and know how most I honour thee." Now were all silent, waiting on Corsus to speak, but he spake not a word. Decalagius said privily in his ear, "O my father, if the monkey reigns, dance before him. Time shall bring us occasion to right you." And Corsus, disregarding not this wholesome reday, for all he might not wholly rule his countenance, yet ruled himself to bite in the injuries he was fain to utter. And with no ill grace he did that office, to set on Corineus's head the new crown of Demonland. Corineus sat now in Spitfire's seat, whence Corsus had moved to make place for him, in Spitfire's high seat of smoke-coloured jade, curiously carved and set with velvet-lusted sapphires, and right and left of him were two high candlesticks of fine gold. The breadth of his shoulders filled all the space between the pillars of the spacious seat. A hard man he looked to deal with, clothed upon with youth and strength, and all armed and yet smoking from the battle. Corsus, sitting between his sons, said under his breath, "Rhubarb! Bring me rhubarb to purge away this choler." But Decalagius whispered him, "Softly, tread easy. Let not our counsels walk in a net, thinking they are hidden. Nurse him to security, which shall be our safety and the mean to our wiping out this shaming. Was not Galandus as big a man?" Corsus's dull eye gleamed. He lifted a brimming wine-cup to toast Corineus. And Corineus hailed him and said, "My lord Duke, call in thine officers, I pray thee, and proclaim me, that they in turn may proclaim me king unto all the army that is in Owlswick." Which Corsus did, albeit sore against his liking, knowing not where to find a reason against it. When the plaudits were heard in the courts without, acclaiming him as king, Corineus spake again and said, "I and my folk be aweary, my lord, and would betimes to our rest. Give order, I pray thee, that they make ready my lodgings, and let them be those same lodgings Galandus had when as he was in Owlswick," whereat Corsus might scarce forbear a start. But Corineus's eye was on him, and he gave the order. While he waited for his lodgings to be made ready, the Lord Corineus made great good cheer, calling for more wine and fresh dainties to set before those lords of Witchland, olives, and botargos, and conserves of goose's liver richly seasoned, taken from Spitfire's plenteous store. In the meantime Corsus spake softly to his sons, "I like not his naming of Galandus, yet seemeth he careless as one that feareth no guile." And Decalagius answered in his ear, "Peradventure the gods ordained his destruction to make him choose that chamber." So they laughed, and the banquet drew to a close with much pleasure and merrymaking. Now came serving men with torches to light them to their chambers. As they stood up to bid good night, Corineus said, "I'm sorry, my lord, if, after thy pleasant usage, I should do aught that is not convenable to thee. But I doubt not, Owlswick Castle must be irksome to thee and thy sons, that were so long mewed up within it, and I doubt not ye are wearied by this siege and long warfare. Therefore it is my will that you do instantly depart home to Witchland. Laxus hath a ship manned ready to transport you thither. To put a fit and friendly term to our festivities, we'll bring you down to the ship." Corsus's jaw fell, yet he schooled his tongue to say, "My lord, so as it shall please thee. Yet let me know thy reasons. Surely the swords of me and my sons avail not so little for Witchland, in this country of our evil willers, that we should sheathe them and go home. Howbeit, 'tis a matter demandeth no sweaty haste. We will take Reda hereon in the morning." But Corinius answered him, "Cry you mercy! Needful it is that this very night you go a shipboard." And he gave him an ill look, saying, "Sith, I lie to-night in Galandus's lodgings. I think it fit my bodyguard should have thy chamber, my lord duke, which, as I lately learned, adjoineth it." Corsus said no word. But Gorius, his younger son, that was drunk with wine, leaped up and said, "Corinius, in an evil hour art thou come into this land to demand servitude of us. And thou art informed of my father right maliciously, if thou art afeard of us because of Galandus. 'Tis this viper sitteth beside thee, the goblin swabber, told thee falsely this bad tale of us. And 'tis pity he is still inward with thee, for still he plotteth evil gainst Witchland." Decalagus thrust him aside, saying to Corinius, "Heed not my brother, though he be hasty and rude of speech, for in wine he speaketh, and wine is another man. But most true it is, O Corinius. And this shall the Duke my father, and all we swear and confirm to thee with the mightiest oaths thou wilt, that Galandus sought to usurp authority for this sake only, to betray our whole army to the enemy. And 'twas only therefore Corsus slew him." "That is a flat lie," said Laxus. Gro laughed lightly, but Corinius's sword leaped half naked from the scabbard, and he made a stride toward Corsus and his sons. "Give me the king's name when ye speak to me," he said, scowling upon them. "You sons of Corsus are not men to make me a stalk to catch birds with or to serve your own turn. And thou," he said, looking fiercely on Corsus, "wert best go meekly, and not bandy words with me. Thou fool! Think'st thou I am Galandus come again? Thou that didst murther him shalt not murther me. Or think'st I delivered thee out of the toils thine own folly and froward ways had bound thee in, only to suffer thee, Lord, it again here, and cast all amiss again by the unquietness of thy malice? Here is the guard to bring you down to the ship, and well it is for thee if I slash not off thy head." Now Corsus and his sons stood for a little doubting in their hearts whether it were fitter to leap with their weapons upon Corinius, putting their fortunes to the hazard of battle in Owlswick Hall, or to embrace necessity and go down to the ship. And this seemed to them the better choice, to go quietly a shipboard, for there stood Corinius and Laxus and their men, and but few to face them of Corsus's own people. That should be sure for his party if it came to fighting. And withal, they were not eager to have to do with Corinius, not though it had been on more even terms. So at the last, in anger and bitterness of heart, they submitted them to obey his will, and in that same hour Laxus brought them to the ship and put them across the firth to Scaramsay. There were they safe as a mouse in a mill. Pocadaris was skipper of that ship, a trusted liegeman of Lord Laxus, and her crewmen leal and true to Corinius and Laxus. She lay at anchor, as for that night, in the lee of the island, and with the first streak of dawn sailed down the firth, bearing Corsus and his sons homeward from Demonland. The parley before Cruthering wherein is shown how warlike policy and a picture painted drew the war westward, and how the Lord Grow went on. Embassage to Cruthering gates, and of the answer He got there. Now it is to be said of Zig that he failed not to fulfill Spitfire's behest, but gathered hastily an army of more than 1,500 horse and foot out of the northern dales and the habitations about Shalgreth Heath and the pasture lands of Kellierland and Switchwater Way, and the region of Ramerick, and came in haste over the stile. But when Corineus knew of this, faring from the west, he marched 3,000 strong to meet them above Moonmere Head, to deny them the way to Galing. But Zig, being yet in the upper defiles of Breakingdale, now for the first time had advertisement of the great slaughter at Thremneir's Hew, and how the forces of Spitfire and Vole were broken and scattered, and themselves fled up into the mountains. And so deeming it small gain, with so little an army to give battle to Corineus, he turned back without more ado, and returned hastily over the stile whence he came. Corineus sent light forces to harry his retreat, but being not minded as then to follow them into the west country, let build a burg in the throat of the pass in a place of vantage, and stationed there sufficient men to ward it, and so came again to Owlswick. They that were with Corineus in Demonland numbered now more than 5,000 fighting men, a great and redoubtable army. With these, the weather being fine and open, he in a short time laid under him all eastern Demonland save Galing alone. Bremery of Shores with but 70 men held Galing for Lord Juss against all assaults, so that Corineus, thinking this fruit should ripen later and drop into his hand when the rest had been gathered, resolved at winter's end to march with his main army into the west country, leaving a small force to hold down the eastlands and contain Bremery in Galing. To this determination he was led by all arguments of sound soldiership, most happily seconding his own inclinations. For besides this of warlike policy, 2 scarce weaker lodestones drew him westward. First the old cankered malice he bare in his heart against the Lord Brandoch Daha, that made Crothering his dearest prey, and next his own lustful desires most outrageously burning for the Lady Mevrian. And this only for the sight of her picture, found by him in Spitfire's closet among his pens and inkstands and other trinkets, which once looked on, he swore that with heaven's will, yea, or without, if so, it must be, she should be his paramour. So on the 14th day of March, of a bright frosty morn, he with his main army marched up Breakingdale and over the stile by that same road that Lord Juss fared by and Lord Brandoch Daha. That summer's day when they went to take counsel in Crothering before the implanned expedition, so came the witches down to the watersmeet and turned aside to many bushes. There they found not Zig, nor his lady wife, nor any of his folk, but found the house desolate. So they robbed and burned and went their way. And a famous castle of Juss's they sacked and burned in the confines of Kellierland, and another on Switchwater Way, and a summer palace of Spitfires on a little hill above Ramerick Mere. In such wise they marched victoriously down Switchwater Way, and there was none to dispute their progress, but all fled at the approach of that great army, and hid themselves in the secret places of the mountains, avoiding death and fate. When he was come through the straits of Gashtondale up onto Crothering side, Corineus let pitch his camp under Erngate End, at the foot of the scree-strewn slopes that rise steeply to the high western face of the mountain, where the lean embattled crags far aloft stand like a wall against high heaven. Corineus came to Lord Grow and said to him, "To thee will I entrust mine embassage to this Mevrian. Thou shalt go with a flag of truce to gain thee entry to the castle, or if they will not admit thee, then bid her parley with thee without the wall. Then shalt thou use what fantastic courtier's jargon. Nature and thine invention shall likeliest counsel thee, and say, Corineus, by the grace of the great king, and the might of his own hand, king of Demonland, sitteth, as thou well mayst see in power, invincible before this castle. But he willed me, let thee know that he is not come for to make war against ladies and damosels, and be thou of this sure, that neither to thee nor to none of thy fortress he will not say nor hurt. Only this honour he proffereth thee, to wed thee in sweet marriage, and make thee his queen in Demonland. Whereto, if she say yea, well and good, and we will go up peaceably into Crothering, and possess it and the woman. But if she deny me this, then shalt thou say unto her right fiercely that I will set on against the castle like a lion, and neither rest nor give over until I have beaten it all to a ruin about her ears, and slain the folk with the edge of the sword. And that which she refuseth me to have in peaceful love and kindness, I will have of my own violent deed, that she and her stiff-necked demons may know that I am their king, and master of all that is theirs, and their own bodies, but chattels to serve my pleasure. Grow said, My lord Corineus, choose, I pray thee, another who shall be fitter than I to do this errand for thee, and so for a long time most earnestly besought him. But Corineus, the more he perceived the duty hateful to Grow, the firmer became his resolution that none but Grow should undertake it. So that in the end Grow perforce consented, and in the same hour went with 11 up to the gates of Crothering, and a white flag of truce was borne before him. He sent his herald up to the gate to desire speech of the Lady Mevrian. And in a while the gates were opened, and she came down, attended to meet Lord Grow in the open garden before the bridge gate. It was by then late afternoon, and the burning sun swam low amid streaked level clouds. Incarnadine, setting aflame the waters of Thunderfirth with the reflection of his beams. From the horizon, high beyond the pine-clad hills of Westmark, a range of clouds reared themselves, solid and of an iron hue, so hard-edged against the vapoury sky of sunset that they seemed substantial mountains, not clouds, unearthly mountains, a man might fancy divinely raised up for Demonland, for whom not all her ancient hills gave any longer refuge against her enemies. Here, in Crothering Gates, wintersweet and the little purple daphne bush that blooms before the leaf breathed fragrance abroad. Yet was it not this sweetness in the air that troubled the Lord Grow, nor that western glory burning that dazzled his eyes, but to look upon that lady standing in the gate, white-skinned and dark, like the divine huntress, tall and proud and lovely. Mevrian, seeing him speechless, said at last, My lord, I heard thou had some errand to declare unto me. And seeing a great camp of war gathered under Erne-gate End, and having heard of robbers and evil-doers rife about the land these many moons, I look not for soft speech. Take heart, therefore, and declare plainly what ill thou meanest. Grow answered and said, Tell me first if thou that speakest art in truth the Lady Mevrian, that I may know whether to humankind I speak, or to some goddess come down from the shining floor of heaven. She answered, Of thy compliments I have naught to do. I am she thou namest. Madam, said Lord Grow, I would not have brought your highness this message nor delivered it, but that I know full well that did I refuse it, another should bear it, thee, full speedily, and with less compliment and less sorrow than I. She nodded gravely, as who should say, Proceed. So, with what countenance he might, he rehearsed his message, saying when it was ended, Thus, madam, saith Corineus the king, and thus he charged me deliver it unto your highness. Mevrian heard him attentively with head erect. When he had done, she was silent a little, still studying him. Then she spake, Methinks I know thee now. Thou art Lord Grow of Goblin Land, that bearest me this message. Grow answered, Madam, he thou namest went years ago from this earth. I am Lord Grow of Witchland. So it seemeth from thy talk, said she, and was silent again. The steady contemplation from that lady's eyes was like a knife scraping his tender skin, so that he was ill at ease, well nigh past bearing. After a little, she said, I remember thee, my lord. Let me stir thy memory. 11 years ago, my brother went to war in Goblin Land against the witches, and overcame them on Lormarin Field. There slew he the great king of Witchland in single combat, Goris X, that until that day was held for the mightiest man at arms in all the world. My brother was, as then, but 18 winters old, and that was the first blazing up of his great fame and glory. So King Gaslark made great feasting and great rejoicing in Zajhai Zakulo, because of the ridding of his land of the oppressors. I was at those revels. I saw thee there, my lord, and being but a little maid of 11 summers, sat on thy knee in Gaslark's halls. Thou didst show me books, with pictures in strange colours of gold and green and scarlet, of birds and beasts and distant countries and wonders of the world. And I, being a little harmless maid, thought thee good and kind of heart, and loved thee. She ceased, and Grow, like a man hath taken some drowsy drug, stood looking on her confounded. Tell me, said she, of this Corineus. Is he such a fighter as men say? He is, said Grow, one of the most famousest captains that ever was. That might not his worst enemies gainsay. Mevrian said, A likely consort, think'st thou, for a lady of Demonland? Remember, I have said nay to crowned kings. I would know thy mind, for doubtless he is thy very familiar friend, since he made thee his go-between. Grow saw that she mocked, and he was troubled at heart. Madam, said he, and his voice shook somewhat, take not in too great scorn this vile part in me. Verily this I brought thee is the most shamefullest message, and flatly against my will did I deliver it unto thee, yet with such constraint upon me, how could I choose but strike my forehead into dauntless marble, and word by word deliver my charge? Thy tongue, said Mevrian, hath struck hot irons in my face. Go back to thy master. If he look for an answer, tell him he may read it in letters of gold above the gates. Thy noble brother, madam, said Grow, is not here to make good that answer. And he came near to her, saying in a low voice, so that only they two should hear it, Be not deceived. This Corineus is a naughty, wicked, and luxurious youth, that will use thee without any respect, if once he break in by force into Crothering Castle. It were wiselier carried to make some open show to receive him, so by fair words and putting of him off thou mayest yet escape. But Mevrian said, Thou hast mine answer. I have no ears to his request. Say too that my cousin the Lord Spitfire hath healed his wounds, and hath an army afoot shall whip these witches from my gates ere many days be passed by. So saying, she returned in great scorn within the castle. But the Lord Grow returned again to the camp, and to Corineus, who asked him how he had sped. He answered, She did utterly refuse it. So, said Corineus, doth the puss thump me off? Then pause my hot desires an instant, only the more thunderingly to clap it on. For I will have her, and this coyness and pert rejection hath the more fixedly confirmed me. The Lady Mevran beheld from covering walls the Witchland army and the captains thereof, and of the tidings brought here there of the war in the west country. Off. Yorwath field and the great slaughter on Switch, what a way. The 4th day after these doings aforehand, the Lady Mevrian walked on the battlements of Crothring Keep. A blustering wind blew from the northwest. The sky was cloudless, clear blue overhead, all else pearl grey, and the air a little misty. Her old steward, stalwart and soldier-like, greaved and helmed and clad in a plated jerkin of bull's hide, walked with her. "The hour should be about striking," said she. "'Tis today or tomorrow my Lord Sig named to me when they were here a-guesting, if but Goblin Land keep tryst it were the prettiest feat to take them so pat. As your ladyship might clap a gnat twixt the palms of your 2 hands, said the old man, and he gazed again southward over the sea. Mevrian set her gaze in the same quarter. "Nothing but mist and spray," she said after a few minutes' searching. "I'm glad I sent Lord Spitfire those 200 horse. He must have. Every man can be scraped up for such a day. How thinkest thou, Ravnor? If King Gaslark come not, hath Lord Spitfire force enow to cope them alone?" Ravnor chuckled in his beard. "I think, and my lord your brother were here, he should tell your highness, A's to that. Since first I bowled a hoop, they taught me a demon was undermatched against 5 witches. She looked at him a little wistfully. "Ah," she said, "were he at home? And were Just at home?" Then, on a sudden, she faced round northward, pointing to the camp. "Were they at home?" she cried. "Thou shouldst not see outlanders insulting in arms on Crothering side, sending me shameful offers, caging me like a bird in this castle. Have such things been in Demonland until now?" Now came a boy, running along the battlements from the far side of the tower, crying that ships were hove in sight, sailing from the south and east, and they make for the firth. "Of what land?" said Mevrian, while they hastened back to look. "What but Goblin Land?" said Radnor. "Oh, say not so too hastily," cried she. They came round the turret wall, and the sea and Stropodon Firth opened wide and void before them. "I see naught," she said. "Or is yon flight of sea Muse the fleet thou sawest?" "He meaneth Thunderfirth," said Ravnor, who had gone on ahead, pointing to the west. "They shape their course toward Orwath. 'Tis King Gaslark for sure. Mark, but the blue and gold of his sails." Mevrian watched them, her gloved hand drumming nervously on the marble battlement. Very stately she seemed, muffled in a flowing cloak of white-watered silk, collared and lined with ermine. 18 ships, she said. "I dreamed not Goblin Land might make so great a force." They were silent for a time, watching the ships sail into the mouth of the Firth and make land at Orwath. "Dear heavens," she said, "were I a man to help them? Will Spitfire be there in time? The witches be in great force." "Your ladyship may see," said Ravnor, walking back along the wall, "whether the Witchlanders have slept while these ships sailed to port." She followed and looked. Great stir there was in the Witchland army, marshalling before the camp. There was coming and going and leaping on horseback, and faintly on the wind their trumpets' blare was borne to Mevrian's ears as she beheld them from her high watchtower. The host moved forth down the meadows, all orderly, a-glitter with bronze and steel. Southward they came, passing at length through the home meads of Crothering, so near that each man was plainly seen from the battlements as they rode beneath. Mevrian leaned forward in an embrasure, one hand on either battlement at her left and right. "I would know their names," said she. "Thou, that hast oft fared to the wars, mayest teach me. Grow, I know, with a long beard and heart-heaviness. It is to see a lord of Goblin Land in such a fellowship. What's he beside him, yon bearded gallant, with a winged helm and a diadem about it? Like a king's, and beareth a glaive crimson, hafted, he looketh a proud one." The old man answered, "Laxus of Witchland, the same that was admiral of their fleet against the ghouls. 'Tis a brave man to look on, and worthy a better cause. What's he rideth now below us, heading their horse, ruddy and swarthy and light of build? Hath a brow like the thundercloud, and weareth armour from neck to toe? Ravner answered, Highness, I know him not. Certainly the sons of Corun so favour one another. But methinks 'tis the young Prince Hemming. Mevrian laughed. Prince Quotha, so moveth the world, your highness. Since Goris set Corund in kingdom in Impland, said Mevrian, name him, prithee. Hemming Faz, I warrant they trap them now with barbarous additions. Hemming Faz, good lack, lording it now in demon land. The prime huff-cap of all, said she after a little, holdeth aback it seemeth. Oh, here he comes. Sweet heaven, what furious horsemanship, troth, and he can sit a horse, Ravner, and hath the great figure of an athlete. Look where he gallopeth bare-headed down the line. I ween he'll need more than golden curls to keep his head whole, ere he have done with Gaslark, aye, and our own folk gathering from the north. I see he beareth his helm at the saddle-bow. To ape us so, she cried, as he drew nearer. All silks and silver. Thou'dst have sworn none but a demon went to battle so costly apparelled. Oh, for a scissors to cut his comb withal. So speaking, she leaned forward all she might to watch him. And he, galloping by below, looked up, and marking her so watching, reined mightily his great chestnut horse, throwing him with the check well nigh on his haunches. And while the horse plunged and reared, Corinius hailed her in a great voice, crying, Mistress, good morrow! Crying, Wish me victory, and swift to thine arms. So near below was he a-riding. She might scan the very lineaments of his face, and read it as he looked up and shouted to her that greeting. He saluted with his sword, and spurred onward to overtake Grow and Laxus in the van. As if sickened on a sudden, or as if she had been ready to tread on a deadly stinging adder, the Lady Mevrian leaned against the marble of the battlements. Ravnor stepped towards her. Is your ladyship ill? Why, what's the matter? A silly qualm, said Mevrian faintly. If thou'dst medicine it, show me the sheen of Spitfire's spears to the northward. The blank land dazzles me. So wore the afternoon. Twice and thrice Mevrian went upon the walls, but could see naught save the sea and the firths and the mountain-bosomed plain fair and peaceful in the springtime. No sign of men or of war's alarms, save only the masts of Gaslark's ships seen over the land's brow 3 miles or more to the southwest. Yet she knew surely that near those ships beside Orwath harbour must be desperate fighting toward. Gaslark the king engaged at heavy odds against Laxus and Corinius and the spears of Witchland. And the sun wheeled low over the dark pines of Westmark, and still no sign from the north. Thou didst send one forth for tidings? She said to Ravner. The third time she went on the wall. He answered, Betimes this morning, your highness. But 'tis slow faring until a be a mile or twain clear of the castle, for a must elude their small bands that go up and down guarding the countryside. Bring him to me o' the instant of his return, said she. With a foot on the stair, she turned back. Ravner, she said. He came to her. Thou, she said, hast been years enow my brother's steward in Crothring, and our fathers before him, to know what mind and spirit dwelleth in them of our line. Tell me truly and sadly what thou makest of this. Lord Spitfire is too late, other else, Goblin land too sudden, early, and that was his fault from of old. What seest thou in it? Speak to me as thou shouldst to my Lord Brandoch, Daha were it he that asked thee. Highness, said the old man Ravnor, I will answer you my very thought, and it is woe to Goblin land. since my lord Spitfire cometh not yet from the north, only the deathless gods descending out of heaven can save the king. The witches number at an humble reckoning twice his strength, and man to man you were as well pit a hound against a bear as against witches' goblins. For all that these be fierce and full of fiery courage, the bear hath it at the last. Mevrian listened, looking on him with sorrowful steady eyes. And he so generous noble flown to comfort Demonland in the blackness of her days, she said at last. Can fate be so ungallant? O Ravna, the shame of it! First Laugh-Ires, now Gaslark. How shall any love us any more? The shame of it, Ravna! I would not have your highness, said Ravna, too hasty to blame us. If their plan and compact have gone amiss, 'tis likelier King Gaslark's misprision than Lord Spitfire's. We know not for sure which day was set for this landing. While he so spake, he was looking past her seaward, a little south of the reddest part of the sunset. His eyes widened. He touched her arm and pointed. Sails were hoisted among the masts at Orwath. Smoke, as of burning, reeked up against the sky. As they watched, the most part of the ships moved out to sea. From those that remained, some 5 or 6, fire leaped and black clouds of smoke. The rest, as they came out of the lee of the land, made southward for the open sea under oar and sail. Neither spake, and the Lady Mevrian, leaning her elbows on the parapet of the wall, hid her face in her hands. Now came Ravna's messenger at length back from his faring, and the old man brought him in to Mevrian in her bower, in the south part of Crothering. The messenger said, Highness, I bring no writing, since that were too perilous, had I fallen in my way among witches. But I had audience of my lord Spitfire and my lord Zig in the gates of Gashtondale, and thus their lordships commanded me deliver it unto you, that your highness should be at ease and secure, seeing that they do in such sort hold all the ways to Crothering, that the Witchland army cannot escape out of this countryside that is betwixt Thunderfirth and Stropodon, Firth and the sea. And if they will give battle unto their lordships, but if they choose rather to abide here by Crothering, then may our armies close on them and oppress them, since our forces do exceed theirs by near 1,000 spears, which tomorrow will be done whate'er betide, since that is the day appointed for Gaslark, the king, to land with a force at Orwath. Mevrian said, They know naught then of this direful miscarriage, and Gaslark here already before his time and thrown back into the sea? And she said, We must apprise them, on't, and that hastily and tonight. When the man understood this, he answered, 10 minutes for a bite and a stirrup cup, and I am at your ladyship's service. And in a short while that man went forth again secretly out of Crothering in the dusk of night to bring word to Lord Spitfire of what was befallen. And the watchmen watching in the night from Crothering walls beheld northward under Airngate, the campfires of the witches like the stars. Night passed, and day dawned, and the camp of the witches showed empty as an empty shell. Mevrian said, They have moved in the night. Then shall your highness hear great tidings ere long, said Ravnor. 'Tis like we may have guests in Crothering tonight, said Mevrian, and she gave order for all to be made ready against their coming, and the choicest bedchambers for Spitfire and Zig to welcome them. So, with busy preparations the day went by. But as evening came, and still no riding from the north, some shadows of impatience and anxious doubt crept with night's shades creeping across heaven, across their eager expectancy in Crothering. For Mevrian's messenger returned not. Late to rest went the Lady Mevrian, and, with the first peeping light, she was abroad, muffled in her great mantle of velvet and swansdown against the eager winds of morning. Up to the battlements she went, and with old Ravna searched the blank prospect. For pale morning rose on an empty landscape, and so all day until the evening, watching and waiting and questioning in their hearts. So went they at length to supper on this third night after Aurwath field. And ere supper was half done was a stir in the outer courts, and the rattle of the bridge let down, and a clatter of horse hoofs on the bridge and the jasper pavements. Mevrian sate erect and expectant. She nodded to Ravnor, who, wanting no further sign, went hastily out, and returned in an instant hastily and with heavy brow. He spake in her ear. "News, my lady. It were well you bade him to private audience. Drink this cup first," pouring out some wine for her. She rose up, saying to the steward, "Come thou, and bring him with thee." As they went, he whispered her, "A star of Rattray, sent by the Lord Zig with matter of urgent import for your highness's ear." The Lady Mevrian sat in her ivory chair, cushioned with rich stuffed silks of Bestria, with little golden birds and strawberry leaves with the flowers and rich red fruits, all figured thereon in gorgeous colours of needlework. She reached out her hand to Astar, who stood before her in his battle harness, muddy and beblooded from head to foot. He bowed and kissed her hand, then stood silent. He held his head high and looked her in the face, but his eyes were bloodshot, and his look was ghastly, like a messenger of ill. "Sir," said Mevrian, "stand not in doubt, but declare all. Thou knowest it is not in our blood to quail under dangers and misfortune." Astar said, "Zig, my brother-in-law, gave me this in charge, madam, to tell thee all truly." "Proceed," said she. "Thou knowest our last news. Hour by hour since then we watched on victory. I have no mean welcome feast prepared against your coming." Astar groaned. "My Lady Mevrian," said he, "you must now prepare a sword, not a banquet. You did send a runner to Lord Spitfire." "Aye," said she. "He brought us advertisement that night," said Astar, "of Gaslark's overthrow. Alas, that goblin land was a day too soon, and so bear alone the brunt. Yet was vengeance ready to our hand, as we supposed, for every pass and way was guarded, and ours the greater force. So for that night we waited, seeing Corinius's fires alight in his camp on Crothering side, meaning to smite him at dawn of day. Now in the night were mists abroad, and the moon early sunken. And true, it is as ill it is, that the whole Witchland army marched away past us in the dark." "What?" cried Mevrian, "and slept ye all to let them by?" "In the middle night," answered he. "We had sure tidings he was afoot, and the fires yet burning in his camp, a show to mock us withal. By all sure signs, we might know he was broke forth northwestward, where he must take the upper road into Mealand over Broxty House. Zig with 700 horse galloped to Heathby to head him off, whiles our main force fared their swiftest up Little Ravendale. Thou seest, madam, Corinius must march along the bow, and we along the bowstring." "Yes," said Mevrian, "he had but to check him with the horse at Heathby, and he must fight or fall back toward Justdale, where he was like to lose half his folk in Memory Moss. Outlanders shall scarce find a firm way there in a dark night." "Certain it is we should have had him," said Astar. "Yet certain it is he doubled like a hare, and fooled us all to the top of our bent, turned in his tracks, as later we concluded, somewhere by Goosesand, and with all his army slipped back eastward under our rear. And that was the wonderfulest feat heard tell of in all chronicles of war." "Tush, noble Astar," said Mevrian. "Labour not Witchland's praises, nor imagine not. I'll deem less of Spitfires nor Zig's generalship, because Corinius, by art or fortune's favour, dodged him in the dark." "Dear lady," said he, even look for the worst, and prepare yourself for the same." Her grey eyes steadily beheld him. "Certain intelligence," said he, "was brought us of their faring with all speed they might east away past Switchwater, and ere the sun looked well over Gemsar Edge, we were hot on the track of them, knowing our force the stronger and our only hope to bring them to battle ere they reached the stile. Where they have made a fortress of great strength, we might scarce hope to hostel them out from if they should win thither." He paused. "Well," said she. "Madam," he said, "that we of Demonland are great and invincible in war, 'tis most certain. But in these days fight we as a man that fighteth hobbled, or with half his gear laid by, or as a man half roused from sleep. For we bereft of our greatest, bereft of these. Such sorrows befall us, and such doom as at Thremne's. Hugh, last autumn shattered our strength in pieces, and now this very day yet more terribly hath put us down on Switchwater way." Mevrian's cheek turned white, but she said no word, waiting. "We were eager in the chase," said Astar. "I have told thee why, madam. Thou knowest how near to the mountains runneth the road past Switchwater, and the shores of the lake hem in the way for miles against the mountain spurs, and woods clothe the lower slopes, and dells and gorges run up betwixt the spurs into the mountain side. The day was misty, and the mists hung by the shores of Switchwater. When we had marched so far that our van was about over against the stead of highbank that stands on the farther shore, the battle began, greatly to their advantage, since Corineus had placed strong forces in the hills on our right flank, and so ambushed us, and took us at unawares. Not to grieve thee with a woeful tale, madam, we were most bloodily overthrown, and our army merely brought to not being. And in the mid-route, Zig stole an instant to charge me by my love for him, ride to Crothring as if my life lay on it, and the weal of all of us, and bid you fly hence to Westmark, or the Isles, or whither you will, ere the witches come again, and here entrap you. Since save for these walls and these few brave soldiers you have to ward them, no help standeth any more twixt you and these devilish witches." Still she was silent. He said, "Let me not be too hateful to you, most gracious lady, for this rude tale of disaster. The suddenness of the times bar any pleasant glozing. And indeed I thought I should satisfy you more with plainness than should opinion of. I know not what false courtliness bind me to show you comfort where comfort is not." The Lady Mevrian stood up and took him by both hands. Surely the light of that lady's eyes was like the new light of morning glancing through mists on the grey, still surface of a mountain tarn, and the accent of her voice sweet as the voices of the morning as she said, "O Astar, think me not so unhandsome, nor yet so foolish. Thanks, gentle Astar. But thou hast not supped, and sure in a great soldier battle and swift far riding should breed hunger, how ill soever the news he beareth. Thy welcome shall not be the colder, because we looked for more than thee, alas, and for far other tidings. A chamber is prepared for thee. Eat and drink, and when night is done is time enough to speak more of these things." "Madam," he said, "you must come now, or 'tis too late." But she answered him, "No, noble Astar, this is my brother's house. So long as I may keep it for him against his coming home, I will not creep out of Crothring like a rat, but stand to my watch. And this is certain, I shall not open Crothring gates to witches, whiles I and my folk yet live to bar them against them." So she made him go to supper, but herself sat late that night alone in the Chamber of the Moon. That was in the Donjon Keep above the inner court in Crothering. This was Lord Brandoch Daha's banquet chamber, devised and furnished by him in years gone by, and here he and she commonly sat at meat, using not the banquet hall across the court, save when great company was present. Round was that chamber, following the round walls of the tower that held it. All the pillars and the walls and the vaulted roof were of a strange stone, white and smooth, and yielding such a glistering show of pallid gold in it as was like the golden sheen of the full moon of a warm night in midsummer. Lamps that were milky opals, self-effulgent, filled all the chamber with a soft radiance, in which the bas-reliefs of the high dado, delicately carved, portraying those immortal blooms of amaranth and nepenthe and molly and Elysian asphodel, were seen in all their delicate beauty, and the fair painted pictures of the Lord of Crothering and his lady sister, and of Lord Juss above the great open fireplace with Goldry and Spitfire on his left and right. A few other pictures there were, smaller than these, the Princess Armeline of Goblinland, Zig and his lady wife, and others, wondrous beautiful. Here a long while sat the Lady Mevriane. She had a little lute, wrought of sweet sandalwood and ivory inlaid with gems. While she sat a-thinking, her fingers strayed idly on the strings, and she sang in a low, sweet voice. There were 3 ravens sat on a tree. They were as black as they might be. With a down, derry down dot stew. The one of them said to his make, Where shall we our breakfast take? Down in yonder green field, there lies a knight slain under his shield. His hounds they lie down at his feet, so well they can their master keep. His hawks they fly so eagerly, there's no fowl dare him come nigh. Down there comes a fallow doe, as great with young as she might go. She lift up his blowdy head, and kissed his wounds that were so red. She gate him up upon her backer, and carried him to earthen lake. She buried him before the prime. She was dead herself ere even song time. God send every gentleman such hawks, such hounds, and such a laman, with a down, derry down. With the last sighing sweetness trembling from the strings, she laid aside the lute, saying, The discord of my thoughts, my lute, doth ill agree with the harmonies of thy strings. Put it by. She fell to gazing on her brother's picture, the Lord Brandoch Daha, standing in his jewelled hauberk laced about with gold, his hand upon his sword, and that lazy laughter, loving yet imperious look of the eyes which in life he had was there, wondrous, lively, caught by the painter's art, and the lovely lines of his brow and lip and jaw, where power and masterful determination slumbered, as brazen Ares might slumber in the arms of the Queen of Love. A long while Mevriane looked on that picture musing. Then, burying her face in the cushions of the long, low seat she sat on, she burst into a great passion of tears. The word began of Ishnain, Nimatra of the Council. Taken by the witches touching the conduct of the war, whereafter in the 5th assault, the castle of Lord Brandosh Daha was made, a prey unto Corineus. Now was little time for debate or conjecture, but with the morrow's morn came the Witchland army once more before Crothering, and a herald sent by Corineus to bid Mevriane yield up the castle and her own proper person, lest a worse thing befall them. Which she stoutly refusing, Corineus let straight assault the castle, but won it not. And in the next 3 days following he thrice assaulted Crothering, and, failing with some loss of men to win an entry, closely invested it. And now summoned he those other lords of Witchland to talk with him. How say ye, or what reader shall we take? They be few only within, to man the walls, and great shame it is to us, and to all Witchland, if we get not this hold taken. So many as we be here, gone up against it, and so great captains. Laxus said, Thou art king in demon-land. Thine it is to take order what shall be done. But if thou desire my rede, then shall I give it thee. I desire each one of you, said Corineus, to show forth to me frankly and freely his rede. And well ye know I strive for naught else but for which land's glory, and to make firm our conquest here. Well, said Laxus, I told thee once already my counsel, and thou wast angry with me. Thou madest a mighty victory on Switchwater Way, which had we followed up, pushing home the sword of our advantage, till the hilts came clap against the breastplate of our adversary, we might now have exterminated from the land the whole nest of them, Spitfire, Zig, and Volley. But now are they gotten away, the devil knows whither, for the preparing of fresh thorns to prick our sides withal. Corineus said, Claim not wisdom after the event, my lord. 'Twas not so. Thou didst advise, thou didst bid me let go. Crothering, a thing I will not do, once I have set mine hand to it. Laxus answered him, Not only did I so advise thee as I have said, but Hemming was by, and will bear me out, that I did offer that he or I with a small force should keep this comfit box shut for thee till thou shouldst have done the main business. 'Tis so, said Hemming. But Corineus said, 'Tis not so, Hemming, and were it so, 'tis easily seen why he or thou shouldst hanker for first suck at this luscious fruit, yet not so easy to see why I should yield it you. That, said Laxus, is very ill said. I see thy memory needs jogging, and thou art sliding into ingratitude. How many such like fruits hast thou enjoyed since we came out hither that we had all the pains and plucking of? Oh, cry thee mercy, my lord, said Corineus. I should have remembered. Dreams of Shriva's moist lips keep thee from straying. But enough of this fooling, to the matter. Lord Laxus flushed. By my faith, said he, this is very much to the matter. 'Twere well, Corineus, if thy loose thoughts were kept from straying. Spend men on a fortress, better assay galing, then. That were a prize worth more to our safety and our lordship here. Aye, said Hemming, seek out the enemy. 'Tis therefore we came hither, not to find women for thee. Thereupon the Lord Corineus struck him across the table, a great buffet in the face. Hemming, mad wrath, snatched out a dagger, but Grow and Laxus, catching him one by either hand, restrained him. Grow said, my lords, you must not word it so dangerous ill. We have but one heart and mind here, to magnify our lord the king and his glory. Thou, Hemming, forget not, the king hath put authority in the hand of Corineus, so that thy dagger set against him setteth most treasonably against the king's majesty. And thou, my lord, I pray be temperate in thy power. Sure, for want of open war, it is that our hands be so ready for these private brawls. When by fair words this stew was cooled again, Corineus bade Grow say forth his mind, what he thought lay next to do. Grow answered, my lord, I am of Laxus's opinion. Abiding here by Crothering, we fare as idle cooks, toying with sweetmeats, while the roast spoils. We should seek out power, and destroy it, where still it fareth free. Lest it swell again to a growth may danger us, wheresoever these lords be fled, think not, they'll be slack to prepare a mischief for us. I see, said Corineus, ye be all three of an accord against me. But there is no one beam of these thoughts. Your discourse hath planted in me, but is able to discern a greater cloud than you do go in. It is very true, said Laxus, that we do think somewhat scornfully of this war against women. Aye, there's the cover off the dish, said Corineus, and a pretty mess within. Y'are woman mad, every jack of you, and this blears your eyes to think me sick of the same folly. Thou and thy little dark-eyed baggage, that I dare swear hath months ago forgot thee for another, hemming here, and I know not what sweet maid his young heart doteth on. Grow, ha, ha, and he fell a-laughing. Wherefore the king saddled me with this goblin he only knoweth, and his secretary the devil, not I. By Satan, thou hast a starved look. I the eyes giveth me to think. The errand I sent thee to Crothering gates did thee no good. My cat's leering look showeth me that my cat goeth a-caterwauing. Dost now find the raven's wing a seemlier hue in a wench's hair to set thy cold blood a-leaping than tawny red? Or dost think this one hath a softer breast than thy queen's to cushion thy perfumed locks? With that word spoken, all three of them leaped from their seats. Grow, with a face ashen grey, said, At me thou mayst spit what filth thou wilt. I am schooled to bear with it for witchland's sake, and until thine own venom choke thee. But this shalt thou not do whiles I live, thou or any other, to let thy bawdy tongue meddle with Queen Presmira's name. Corineus sat still in his chair in a posture of studied ease, but his sword was ready. His great jowl was set. His insolent blue eyes scornfully looked from one to another of those lords where they stood menacing him. Sure, said he at last, who brought her name into it but thyself? My Lord Grow, not I. Thou wert best not bring it in again, Corineus, said Hemming. Have we not well followed thee and upheld thee? And so shall we do henceforth. But remember, I am King Corin's son, and if thou speak this wicked lie again, it shall cost thee thy life if I may. Corineus threw out his arms and laughed. Come, said he, standing up with much show of jolly friendliness, 'twas but a jest, and I freely acknowledge an ill jest. I'm sorry for it, my lords. And now, said he, come we again to the matter. Crothering Castle will I not forgo, since 'tis not my way to turn back for any man on earth, no, not for the gods almighty. Once I have tarn my course, but I will make a bargain with you, and this it is, that we tomorrow do assault the hold a last time, using all our men and all our might. And if, as I think is most unlikely and most shameful, we get it not, then shall we fare away and do according to thy counsel, O Laxus. 'Tis now 4 days lost, said Laxus. Thou canst not retrieve them. How so? Be it as thou wilt. So break up their counsel. But the mind and heart of the Lord Grow was naught peaceful within him, but tumultuous with manifold imaginings of hopes and fears and old desires, that intertwined like serpents, twisting and contending, so that naught was clear to him save the unclear trouble of his discontent. And it was as if the conscience of a secret grant his inward mind made had suddenly cast a veil betwixt his thoughts and him that he durst not pluck aside. Betimes on the morrow, Corineus let fare against Crothering with all his host, Laxus from the south, Hemming and Cargo from the east against the main gates, and himself from the west, where the walls and towers showed strongest, but the natural strength of the place weaker than elsewhere. Now they within were few, because of Mevrian's sending of those 200 horse to follow Zig, and those came not back after Switchwater. And as the day wore, and still the battle went forward, and still were wounds given and taken, the odds swung yet heavier against them of Demonland, and more must the castle hold of its own strength only, for there were not whole men left enow to man the walls. And now had Corineus well nigh won the castle, faring up on the walls west of the donjon tower, where he and his fell to clearing the battlements, rushing on like wolves. But Astar of Retri stayed him there with so great a sword stroke on the helm that he overthrew him all astonied down without the wall and into the ditch. but his men drew him forth and saved him. So was the Lord. Corineus put out of the fight, but greatly still he egged on his men. And about the 5th hour after noon, the sons of Corund gat the main gate. Lady Mevrian bare in that hour with her own hand a stoup of wine to Astar in a lull of the battle. While he drank, she said, Astar, the hour demandeth that I pledge thee to obedience, even as I pledged mine own folk and Ravnor, that here commandeth my garrison in Crothering. My Lady Mevrian, answered he, under your safety I shall obey you. She said, no condition, sir. Hearken and know. First, I will thank thee and these valiant men that so mightily warded us and golden Crothering against our enemies. This was my mind, to ward it unto the last, because it is my dear brother's house, and I count it unworthy. Corineus should stable his horses in our chambers, and carousing amid his drunkards do hurt to our fair banquet hall. But now, by hard necessity of disastrous war, hath this thing come to pass, and all fallen into his hand, save only this, keep alone. Alas, madam, said he, to our shame I may not deny it. Oh, trample out any thought of shame, said she, a score of them against every one of us. The glory of our defence shall be for ever. But now, 'tis for me mainly. He still beareth against Crothering so great and peasant strokes as thick as rain falleth from the sky. And now must ye obey me and do my commandment, else must we perish, for even this tower we are not enough to hold against him many days. Divine lady, said Astar, but once shall one pass the cruel pass of death. I and your folk will defend you unto that end. Sir, said she, standing like a queen before him, I shall now defend myself and our precious things in Crothering more certainly than ye men of war may do. And she showed him shortly that this was her design, to yield up the keep unto Corineus under promise of a safe conduct for Astar and Ravnor and all her men. And submit thee to this, Corineus? said Astar. But she answered, Thy sword hath lightly cut his claws for a while. I fear him not. Of all this would Astar at first have naught to do, and the old steward withal was well nigh mutinous. But so firm of purpose was she, and withal showed them so plainly that this was the only hope to save herself and Crothering, and the witches must else sack the house of Crothering, and in a few days win the keep. And then snaky despair, and the fault on't not in fortune, but in ourselves. That could not frame ourselves to our fortune, that at last with heavy hearts they consented to do her bidding. Without more ado was a parley called. Mevrian, speaking for herself from a high window opening on the court, and grove for Corineus. In which parley it was articled that she should render up the tower, and that the fighting men which were within should have peace and safe passage whither they would, and that there should be no scathe nor outrage done to Crothering, neither to the lands thereof, and that all this should be writ down and sealed under the hands of Corineus, Grow, and Laxus, and the gates opened to the witches and all keys delivered up within an half hour of the giving of the sealed writing into Mevrian's hand. Now was all this performed accordingly, and Crothering keep rendered to the Lord Corineus. Astar and Ravnor and their men would have abided as prisoners for Mevrian's sake, but Corineus would not suffer it, vowing with bloody imprecations that he would let slay out of hand any man of them he should take after an hour's space within 3 miles of Crothering. So, under Mevrian's straight commands, they departed. The Lord Corineus would take unto himself a queen in Demon Land, and made him a bridal feast thereto, wherein is a notable instance How unto them which the gods do love? Helpers are raised up, and comforters even in the midst of their enemies. That same evening, Corineus let dight a banquet in the chamber of the moon for some 200 of his chiefest men, a very pompous and kingly entertainment, and conceiving that he might now very well avail to accomplish his pleasure touching the Lady Mevrian, he sent her word by one of his gentlemen that she should attend him there, and she, sending answer to tell him gently all else in the castle was at his service, but for herself she was quite fordone, and greatly desired rest and sleep that night. He fell a-laughing immoderately, and saying, A most unseasonable desire, and one that smacketh besides of mockery, since well she knoweth what this night I do intend. Wish her to repair to us, and that right swiftly, lest I fetch her. To that message sent her, came she in a short while herself to answer, dressed all in funereal black, her gown and close-fitting bodice of black sendal slashed with black sarcenet, and about her throat a chain of sapphires darkly lustrous. Very nobly she carried her head. Framed with the piled and braided masses of her night-dark hair, her face showed pale indeed, but unruffled and undismayed. All at her coming in stood up to greet her, and Corineus said, Lady, thou didst change thy mind quickly, since thou didst first affirm thou never wouldst yield up Crothering unto me. As quickly as I might, my lord, said she, for I saw I was wrong. He abode silent a minute, his eyes like amorous surfeiters overrunning her fair form. Then said he, Thou didst wish to purchase safety for thy friends. She answered, Yes. For thine own self, said Corineus, it had made no jot of difference. Be witness unto me the omnisciency of the gods, whereunto is nothing concealable. I mean the only good. My lord, said she, I embrace the comfort of that word, and know that good to me is mine own freedom, not conditions of any man's choosing. Whereto he, being well tippled with wine, framing the most lovely countenance he might, made answer, I doubt not, but to-night, madam, thou shalt be well advised to choose that highest condition, and, till to-day unknown, which I shall proffer thee, to be Queen of Demonland. She thanked him in her best manner, but said she was minded to forego that supposedly pleasing eminence. How? Said he, is it too little a thing for thee? Or is it as I think that thou laughest? She said, My lord, it should little beseem me that am of the seed of men of war, since long generations, to trap my mind with the false shows of a greatness that is gone. Yet I pray you forget not. This the dominion of the demons hath used to soar a pitch above common royalty, and like the eye of day regarded kings from above. And for this style of queen thou offerest me, I say unto thee, it is an addition I desire not, who am sister unto him that writ that writing above the gate, that all ye had tasted the truth thereof had he been here to meet with you. Corineus said, True it is, some have outbragged the world, yet I ere this have used them like knaves. My jackboot hath known things in Carca, madam, I'll not gall thy heart to tell thee of. But perceiving a great glow of disdainful anger blaze in Mevrian's eye, Cry you mercy, said he, incomparable lady. This was beside the mark. I would not sully our new friendship with memories of, oh, there, a chair beside me for the queen. But Mevrian made them set it on the far side of the board, and there sat her down, saying, I pray thee, my lord Corineus, unsay that word. Thou knowest it dislikes me. He looked on her in silence for a minute, leaned forward across the board, his lips parted a little, and between them his breath coming and going thick and swift. Well, he said, sit there, and it like thee, madam, and manage my delights by stages. Last year the wide world betwixt us, this year the mountains, yestereve crothering walls, to-night a table's breadth, and ere night be done, not so much as— Grow saw the wild deer look in Lady Mevrian's eyes. She said, "This is talk I have not learned to understand, my lord." "I shall learn it thee," said Corineus, his face aflame. "Lovers live by love as larks by leeks. By Satan, I do love thee as thou wert the heart out of my body." "My lord Corineus," said she, "we ladies of the north have little stomach for these fashions, how they commend them in waterish witchland. If thou'lt have my friendship, bring me service therefore, and that in season. This is no fit table talk." "Why there," said he, "we're in fast agreement. I'll blithely show thee all this, and a quainter thing beside, in thine own chamber. But 'twas beyond my hopes thou'dst grant me that so suddenly. Are we so happy?" In great shame and anger the Lady Mevrian stood up from the table. Corineus, something unsteadily, leaped to his feet. For all his bigness, so tall she was, she looked him level in the eye. And he, as when in the face of a night-ranging beast, suddenly. A man brandishes a bright light, stood stupid under that gaze, the springs of action strangely frozen in him on a sudden, and said sullenly, "Madam, I am a soldier. Truly mine affection standeth not upon compliment. That I am impatient, put the white on thy beauty, not on me. Pray you, be seated." But Mevrian answered, "Thy language, my lord, is too bold and vicious. Come to me tomorrow if thou wilt, but I'll have thee know, patience only and courtesy shall get good of me." She turned to the door. He, as if with the turning away of that lady's eyes the spell was broke, cried loudly upon his folk to stay her. But there was none stirred. Therewith he, as one that cannot command his own indecent appetites, or setting bench and board in eager haste to lay hands on her, it so betided that he tripped up with one of these and fell a-sprawling. And ere he was gotten again on his feet, the Lady Mevrian was gone from the hall. He rose up painfully, proffering from his lips a mud-spring of barbarous and filthy imprecations, so that Laxus, who helped raise him up, was fain to chide him, saying, "My lord, unman not thyself by such a bestial transformation. Are not we yet with harness on our backs in a kingdom newly gained, the old lords thereof discomfited indeed, but not yet ta'en nor slain, studying belike to raise new powers against us, and above such and so many affairs wilt thou make place for the allurements of love?" "Aye," answered he, "nor shall such a sapless ninny as thou avail to cross me therein. Ask thy little gamesome Shriva, when thou comest home to wed her, if I be not better able than thou to please a woman. She'll tell thee. I, the mean season, meddle not in matters that be too high for such as thou." Both Grow and the sons of Corund were by and heard those words. The Lord Laxus schooled himself to laugh. He turned toward Grow, saying, "The general is far gone in wine." Grow, marking Laxus's face flushed red to the ears for all his studied carelessness, answered him softly, "'Tis so, my lord, and in wine is truth." Now Corineus, bethinking him that it was yet early, and the feast barely well begun, let set a guard on all the passages which led to Mevrian's lodgings, to the end that she might not issue therefrom, but there wait on his pleasure. That done, he bade renew their feasting. No stint of luscious meats and wines was there, and the lords of Witchland sat them down again right eagerly to the good banquet. Laxus spoke secretly to Grow. "I wot well thou takest in very ill part these doings. Let it stand firm in thy mind, that if thou shouldst deem it fitting to play him a trick and steal the lady from him, I'll not stand eyes the way on't." "In a bunch of cards," said Grow. "Knaves wait upon the kings. It were not so ill done, and we made it so here. I heard a bird sing lately. Thou hadst a quarrel to him." "Thou must not think so," answered Laxus. "I'll give thee still a Roland for thine, Oliver, and tell thee, 'tis most apparent, thyself dost love this lady." Grow said, "Thou chargest me with a sweet folly is foreign to my nature, being a grave scholar, that if ever I did frequent such toys, have long eschewed them. Only meseems 'tis an ill thing if she must be given over unto him against her will. Thou knowest him of a rough and mere soldierly mind, besides his dissolute company with other women." "Tush," said Laxus, "he may go his gait for me, and be as close as a butterfly with the lady. But out of policy, 'twere best rid her hence. I'd not be seen in't. That provided, I'll second thee all ways. If he lie here the summer long in amorous dalliance, justly might the king upbraid us that midst of the day's sport we gave his good hawk a gorge, and so lost him the game." "I see," said Grow, smiling in himself. "Thou art a man of sober government and understanding, and thinkest first of Witchland. And that is both just and right." Now went the feast forward, with great surfeiting and swigging of wine. Mevrian's women that were there, much against their own good will, to serve the banquet, set ever fresh dishes before the feasters, and poured forth fresh wines, golden and tawny and ruby red, in the goblets of jade and crystal and hammered gold. The air in the fair chamber was thick with the steam of bake-meats and the vinous breath of the feasters, so that the lustre of the opal lamps burned coppery. And about each lamp was a bush of coppery beams, like the beams about a torch that burns in a fog. Great was the clatter of cups, and great the clinking of glass, as in their drunkenness the witches cast down the priceless beakers on the floor, smashing them in shivers. And huge din there was of laughter and song, and amidst of it women's voices singing, albeit near drowned in the hurly-burly. For they constrained Mevrian's damosels in Crothering to sing and dance before them, howsoever woeful at heart. And to other entertainment than this of dance and song was many a black-bearded reveller willing to constrain them, and sought occasion thereto, but this by stealth only, and out of eye-shot of their general. For heavily enow was his wrath fallen on some who rashly flaunted in his face their light disports, presuming to hunt in such fields while their lord went still a-fasting. After a while Hemming, who sat next to Grow, began to say to him in a whisper, "This is an ill banquet." "Meseems rather. 'Tis a very good banquet," said Grow. "Would I saw some other issue thereof," said Hemming, "than that he purposeth. Or how thinkest thou?" "I scarce can blame him," answered Grow. "'Tis a most lumsome lady. Is not the man a most horrible open swine? And is it to be endured that he should work his lewd purpose on so sweet a lady?" "What have I to do with it?" said Grow. "What less than I?" said Hemming. "It dislikes thee?" said Grow. "Art thou a man?" said Hemming. "And she that hateth him besides as bloody Atropos." Grow looked him a swift searching look in the eye. Then he whispered, his head bowed over some raisins he was a-picking, "If this is thy mind, 'tis well." And speaking softly, with here and there some snatch of louder discourse or jest, between whiles, lest he should seem too earnestly engaged in secret talk, he taught Hemming orderly and clearly what he had to do, discovering to him that Laxus also, being bit with jealousy, was of their accord. "Thy brother Cargo is aptest for this. He standeth about her height, and by reason of his youth is yet beardless. Go find him out. Rehearse unto him word by word all this talking that hath been between me and thee. Corineus holdeth me too deep suspect to suffer me out of his eye to-night. Unto you, sons of Corund, therefore is the task, and I, biding at his elbow, may avail to hold him here, I the hall, till it be performed. Go, and wise counsel and good speed wait on your attempts. The Lady Mevrian, being escaped to her own chamber in the south tower, sat by an eastern window that looked across the gardens and the lake, past the sea locks of Stropodon and the dark hills of Eastmark, to the stately ranges afar which overhang in mid-air Mosedale and Mirkdale and Svortriverdale and the inland sea of Throwater. The last lights of day still lingered on their loftier summits, on Ironbeak, on the gaunt wall of Scarta, and on the distant twin towers of Dina, seen beyond the lower Mosedale range in the depression of Neverdale Horse. Behind them rolled up the ascent of heaven, the wheels of quiet. Night, holy night, mother of the gods, mother of sleep, tender nurse of all little birds and beasts that dwell in the field, and all tired hearts, and weary mother besides, of strange children, affrights, and rapes, and midnight murders bold. Mevrian sat there, till all the earth was blurred in darkness, and the sky a-throb with starlight, for it was yet an hour until the rising of the moon, and she prayed to Lady Artemis, calling her by her secret names, and saying, Goddess and maiden chaste and holy, triune goddess, which in heaven art, and on the earth huntress divine, and also hast in the veiled, sunless places below earth. Thy dwelling, viewing the large stations of the dead, save me and keep me that am thy maiden still. She turned the ring upon her finger, and scanned in the gathering gloom the bezel thereof, which was of that chrysoprase that is hid in light and seen in darkness, being as a flame by night, but in the daytime yellow or wan. And behold, it palpitated with splendor from withinward, and was as if 1,000 golden sparks danced and swirled within the stone. While she pondered what interpretation lay likeliest on this sudden flowering of unaccustomed splendor within the chrysoprase, behold, one of her women of the bedchamber, who brought lights, and said, standing before her, Twain of those lords of Witchland would speak with your ladyship in private. Two? Said Mevrian. There's safety yet in numbers. Which be they? Highness, they be tall and slim of body, they be black avised, they bear them discreet as dormies, and most commendably sober. Mevrian asked, Is it the Lord Grow? Hath he a great black beard, much curled and perfumed? Highness, I marked not that either weareth a beard, said the woman, nor their names I know not. Well, said Mevrian, admit them, and do thou and thy fellows attend me whiles I give them audience. So it was done according to her bidding, and there entered in those two sons of Corund. They greeted her with respectful salutations, and Hemming said, Our errand, most worshipful lady, was for thine own ear only if it please thee. Mevrian said to her women, Make fast the doors, and attend me in the antechamber. And now, my lords, said she, and waited for them to begin. She was seated sideways in the window, betwixt the light and the dark. The crystal lamps shining from within the room showed deeper darknesses in her hair than night's darkness without. The curve of her white arms resting in her lap was like the young moon cradled above the sunset. A falling breeze out of the south came laden with the murmur of the sea, far away beyond fields and vineyards, restlessly surging even in that calm weather amid the sea caves of Stropodon. It was as if the sea and the night enfolding Demonland gasped in indignation at such things as Corineus, holding himself already an undoubted possessor of his desires, devised for that night in Crothering. Those brethren stood abashed in the presence of such rare beauty. Hemming, with a deep breath, spake and said, Madam, what slender opinion soever thou hast held of us of Witchland, I pray thee be satisfied that I and my kinsmen have sought to thee now with a clean heart to do thee service. Princes, said she, scarce might ye blame me did I misdoubt you. Yet, seeing that my life's days have been not among ambidexters and coney catchers, but lovers of clean hands and open dealing, not even after that which I this night endured will mine heart believe that all civility is worn away in Witchland. Did I not freely receive Corineus himself when I did open my gates to him, firmly believing him to be a king, and not a ravening wolf? Then said Hemming, Canst thou wear armour, madam? Thou art something of an height with my brother. To bring thee past the guard, if thou go armed, as I shall conduct thee, the wine they have drunken shall be thy minister. I have provided an horse. In the likeness of my young brother mayst thou ride forth to-night out of this castle, and win clean away. But in thine own shape thou mayst never pass from these thy lodgings, for he hath set a guard thereon, being resolved, come thereof what may, to visit thee here this night in thine own chamber, madam. The sounds of furious revelry floated up from the banquet chamber. Mevrian heard by snatches the voice of Corineus singing an unseemly song, as in the presence of some dark influence that threatened an ill she might not comprehend, yet felt her blood quail and her heart grow sick because of it. She looked on those brethren. She said at last, Was this your plan? Hemming answered, It was. The Lord Grow did most ingenuously conceive it. But Corineus, as he hath ever held him in distrust, and most of all when he hath drunken overmuch, keepeth him most firmly at his elbow. Cargo now did off his armour, and Mevrian, calling in her women to take this and other gear, fared straightway to an inner chamber to change her fashion. Hemming said to his brother, Thou shalt need to go about it with great circumspection, to come off when we are gone, so as thou be not espied. Were I thou, I should be tempted for the rareness of the jest to await his coming, and assay whether thou couldst not make as good a counterfeit Mevrian as she a counterfeit Cargo. Thou, said Cargo, mayst well laugh and be gay, thou that must conduct her. And art resolved, I dare lay my head to a turnip, to do thy utmost endeavour to despoil Corineus of that felicity he hath to, night decreed him, and bless thyself therewith. Thou hast fallen, answered Hemming, into a most barbarous thought. Shall my tongue be so false a traitor to mine heart, as to say I love not this lady? Compare but her beauty and my youth together. How should it other be? But with such a height of fervour I do love her, that I'd as lief offer violence to a star of heaven, as require of her aught but honest. Said Cargo, What said the wise little boy to his elder brother? Sith thou'st gotten the cake, brother, I must e'en make shift with the crumbs. When you are gone, and all wished and quiet, and I left here amid the waiting women, it shall go hard, but I'll teach 'em somewhat afore good night. Now opened the door of the inner chamber, and there stood before them the Lady Mevrian, armed and helmed. She said, "'Tis no light matter to halt before a cripple. Think you, this will pass eyes the dark, my lords?" They answered, "'Twas beyond all commendation. Excellent." "I'll thank thee now, Prince Cargo," said she, stretching out her hand. He bowed and kissed it in silence. "This harness," she said, "shall be a keepsake unto me of a noble enemy, which some day I might call thee friend, for such wise hast thou borne thee this night." Therewith, bidding young Cargo adieu, she, with his brother, went forth from the chamber and through the antechamber to that shadowy stairway where Corineus's soldiers stood sentinel. These, as many more be drowned in the beaker than in the ocean, not overheedful after their tipplings, Seeing two go by together with clanking armor, and knowing Hemming's voice when he answered the challenge, made no question. But here were Corin's sons returning to the banquet. So passed he and she lightly by the sentinels. But as they fared by the lofty corridor without the chamber of the moon, the doors of that chamber opening suddenly left and right, there came forth torch bearers and minstrels, 2 by 2, as in a progress, with cymbals clashing and flutes and tambourines, so that the corridor was fulfilled with the flare of flamboys and the din. In the midst walked the Lord Corineus. The lusty blood within him burned scarlet in all his shining face, and made stand the veins like cords on the strong neck and arms and hands of him. The thick curls above his brow, where they strayed below his coronal of sleeping nightshade, were a-drip with sweat. Plain it was he was in no good trim. After that shrewd knock on the head, a star that day had given him, to withstand deep quaffings. He went between Grow and Laxus, swaying heavily now on the arm of this one, now of the other, his right hand beating time to the music of the bridal song. Mevrian whispered to Hemming, "Let us bear out a good face so long as we be alive." They stood aside, hoping to be passed by unnoticed, for retreat nor concealment was there none. But Corineus, his eye lighting on them, stopped and hailed them, catching them each by an arm and crying, "Hemming, thou'rt drunk! Cargo, thou'rt drunk, sweet youth!" "'Tis a damnable folly. Drink as drunk as you be, and these bonny wenches I've provided you. How shall I satisfy 'em, think ye, when they come to me with their plaints to mourn, that each must sit with a snoring drunkard's head in her lap the night long?" Mevrian, as if she had all her part by rote, was leaned this while heavily upon Hemming, hanging her head. Hemming could think on naught lightlier to say than, "Truly, O Corineus, we be sober." "Thou liest," said Corineus. "'Twas ever sign manifest of drunkenness to deny it. Look you, my lords, I deny not. I am drunk, therefore is sign manifest. I am drunk, I mean sign manifest, I am sober. But the hour calleth to other work than questioning of these high matters. Set on!" So speaking, he reeled heavily against Grow, and, as if moved by some airy influence that, whispering him of schemings afoot, yet conspired with the wine that he had drunken to make him look all otherwhere for treason than where it lay under his hand to discover it, gripped Grow by the arm, saying, "Bide by me, goblin, thou wert best. I do love thee very discreetly, and will still hold thee by the ears, to see thou bite me not, nor go no more a-gadding." Being by such happy fortune delivered out of this peril, Hemming and Mevrian, with what prudent haste they might, and without mishap or hindrance, got them their horses, and fared forth of the main gate between the marble hippogriffs, whose mighty forms shone above them stark in the low beams of the rising moon. So they rode silently through the gardens and the home meads, and thence to the wild woods beyond, quickening now their pace to a gallop on the yielding turf. So hard they rode. The air of the windless April night was lashed into storm about their faces. The trample and thunder of hoofbeats and the flying glimpses of the trees were to young Hemming but an undertone to the thunder of his blood, which night and speed and that lady galloping beside him knee to knee set a gallop within him. But to Mevrian's soul, as she galloped along those woodland rides, those moonlight glades, these things and night and the steadfast stars attuned a heavenlier music, so that she waxed momently wondrous peaceful at heart, as with the most firm assurance that not without the abiding glory of Demonland must the great mutations of the world be acted, and, but for a little, should their evil willers usurp her dear brother's seat in Crothering. They drew rein in a clearing, beside a broad stretch of water. Pine woods rose from its further edge, shadowy in the moonshine. Mevrian rode to a little eminence that stood above the water and turned her eyes toward Crothring. Save by her instructed and loving eye, scarce might it be seen, many miles away be east of them, dimmed in the obscure soft radiance under the moon. So sat she a while looking on golden Crothring, while her horse grazed quietly, and Hemming at her elbow held his peace, only beholding her. At last, looking back and meeting his gaze, "Prince Hemming," she said, "from this place goeth a hidden path north about beside the firth, and a dry road over the marsh, and a ford and an upland horseway leadeth into Westmark. Here and all? Whereas in Demon Land I might fare blindfold, and here I'll say farewell. My tongue is a poor orator, but I mind me of the words of the poet where he saith, My mind is like to the asbeston stone, which if it once be heat in flames of fire, tendeth to become cold again. Be the latter issue of these wars in my great kinsman's victory, as I most firmly trow it shall be, or in Goris's his, I shall not forget this experiment of your nobility, manifested unto me this night." But Hemming, still beholding her, answered not a word. She said, "How fares the queen thy stepmother?" "7 summers ago this summer, I was in Norvasp at Lord Corran's wedding feast, and stood by her at the bridal." "Is she yet so fair?" he answered. "Madam, as June bringeth the golden rose unto perfection, so waxeth her beauty with the years. She and I," said Mevrian, "were playmates, she the elder by 2 summers. Is she yet so masterful?" "Madam, she is a queen," said Hemming, nailing his very eyes on Mevrian. Her face half turned towards him, sweet mouth half closed, clear eyes uplifted toward the east, showed dim in the glamour of the moon, and the lilt of her body was as a lily fallen a-dreaming beside some enchanted lake at midnight. With a dry throat he said, "Lady, until tonight, I had not supposed there lived on earth a woman more beautiful than she." Therewith the love that was in him went like a wind and like an up-swooping darkness athwart his brain. As one who has too long, unbold, unresolved, delayed to lift that door's latch which must open on his heart's true home, he caught his arms about her. Her cheek was soft to his kiss, but deadly cold, her eyes like a wild bird's caught in a purse net. His brother's armour that cased her body was not so dead, nor so hard under his hand. As to his love, that yielding cheek, that alien look, he said, as one a-stagger for his wits in the presence of some unlooked-for chance, "Thou dost not love me?" Mevrian shook her head, putting him gently away. Like the passing of a fire on a dry heath in summer, the flame of his passion was passed by, leaving but a smouldering desolation of scornful, sullen wrath, wrath at himself and fate. He said in a low, shamed voice, "I pray you forgive me, madam." Mevrian said, "Prince, the gods give thee good night. Be kind to Crothring. I have left there an evil steward." So saying, she reined up her horse's head and turned down westward towards the firth. Hemming watched her an instant, his brain a-reel. Then, striking spurs to his horse's flanks so that the horse reared and plunged, he rode away at a great pace east again through the woods to Crothring. Lord Grow and the Lady Mevrian. Howl. The Lord Grow, conducted by a strange enamorment with lost causes, fared with none, save this to be his guide into the regions of Neverdale, and there beheld wonders, and tasted again for a season the goodness of those things he did most desire. 90 days and a day after these doings aforesaid, in the last hour before the dawn, was the Lord Grow riding toward the paling east, down from the hills of Eastmark to the fords of Marderdale. At a walking pace, his horse came down to the waterside and halted with fetlocks awash. His flanks were wet and his wind gone, as from swift faring on the open fells since midnight. He stretched down his neck, sniffed the fresh river water, and drank. Grow turned in the saddle, listening, his left hand thrown forward to slack the reins, his right flat planted on the crupper. But naught there was to hear save the babble of waters in the shallows, the sucking noise of the horse drinking, and the plash and crunch of his hooves when he shifted feet among the pebbles. Before and behind, and on either hand, the woods and strath and circling hills showed dim in the obscure grey betwixt darkness and twilight. A light mist hid the stars. Naught stirred save an owl that flitted like a phantom out from a holly bush, in a craggy bluff a bowshot or more downstream, crossing Grow's path and lighting on a branch of a dead tree above him on the left, where she sat as if to observe the goings of this man and horse that trespassed in this valley of quiet night. Grow leaned forward to pat his horse's neck. "Come, gossip, we must on," he said, "and marvel not if thou find no rest, going with me which could never find any steadfast stay under the moon's globe." So they forded that river and fared through low, rough grasslands beyond, and by the skirts of a wood up to an open heath, and so a mile or two still eastward, till they turned to the right down a broad valley and crossed a river above a watersmeet, and so east again up the bed of a stony stream, and over this to a rough mountain track that crossed some boggy ground and then climbed higher and higher above the floor of the narrowing valley to a pass between the hills. At length the slope slackened, and they passing, as through a gateway, between two high mountains which impended sheer and stark on either hand, came forth upon a moor of ling and bog myrtle, strewn with lakelets and abounding in streams and moss-hags and outcrops of the living rock, and the mountain peaks afar stood round that moorland waste like warrior kings. Now was colour waking in the eastern heavens, the bright shining morning beginning to clear the earth. Conies scurried to cover before the horse's feet, small birds flew up from the heather. Some red deer stood at gaze in the fern, then tripped away southward, a moorcock called. Grow said in himself, "How shall not common opinion account me mad, so rash and presumptuous dangerously to put my life in hazard? Nay, against all sound judgment. And this folly I enact in that very season when by patience and courage and my politic wisdom I had won that, in despite of fortune's teeth, which obstinately hitherto she had denied me, when after the brunts of divers tragical fortunes I had marvellously gained the favour and grace of the king, who very honourably placed me in his court and tendereth me, I well think, so dearly as he doth the balls of his two eyes." He put off his helm, baring his white forehead and smooth black curling locks to the airs of morning, flinging back his head to drink deep through his nostrils the sweet, strong air and its peaty smell. "Yet is common opinion. The fool, not I," he said. "He that imagineth after his labours to attain unto lasting joy, as well may he beat water in a mortar. Is there not in the wild benefit of nature instances enow to laugh this folly out of fashion? A fable of great men that arise and conquer the nations, day goeth up against the tyrant night. How delicate a spirit is she! How like a fawn she footeth it upon the mountains, pale, pitiful light, matched with the primeval dark. But every sweet hovers in her battalions, and every heavenly influence coolth of the wayward little winds of morning, flowers awakening, birds a carol, dews a sparkle on the fine-drawn webs. The tiny spinners hang from fern, frond to thorn. From thorn to wet, dainty leaf of the silver birch, the young day laughing in her strength, wild with her own beauty, fire and life and every scent and colour born anew to triumph over chaos and slow darkness and the kinless night. But because day at her dawning hours hath so bewitched me, must I yet love her when glutted with triumph she settles to garish noon? Rather turn, as now I turn to Demonland in the sad sunset of her pride. And who dares call me turncoat? Who do but follow now, as I have followed this rare wisdom all my days, to love the sunrise and the sundown and the morning and the evening star, since there only abideth the soul of nobility, true love and wonder, and the glory of hope and fear. So brooding, he rode at an easy pace, bearing east and a little north across the moor, falling because of the strange harmony that was between outward things and the inward thoughts of his heart into a deep study. So came he to the moor's end, and entered among the skirts of the mountains beyond, crossing low passes, threading a way among woods and watercourses, up and down, about and about. The horse led him which way that he would, for no heed nor advice had he of aught about him, for cause of the deep contemplation that he had within himself. It was now high noon. The horse and his rider were come to a little dell of green grass, with a beck winding in the midst, with cool water flowing over a bed of shingle. About the dell grew many trees, both tall and straight. Above the trees high mountain crags, abake in the sun, showed ethereal through the shimmering heat. A murmur of waters, a hum of tiny wings flitting from flower to flower, the sound of the horse grazing on the lush pasture. There was naught else to hear. Not a leaf moved, not a bird. The hush of the summer noonday, breathless, burnt through with the sun, more awful than any shape of night, paused above that lonely dell. Grow, as if waked by the very silence, looked quickly about him. The horse felt belike in his bones his rider's unease. He gave over his feeding, and stood alert with wild eye and quivering flanks. Grow patted and made much of him. Then, guided by some inward prompting the reason whereof he knew not, turned west by a small tributary beck and rode softly toward the wood. Here he was, stopped with a number of trees so thickly placed together that he was afraid he should, with riding through, be swept from the saddle. So he lighted down, tied his horse to an oak, and climbed the bed of the little stream till he was come, whence he might look north over the tree-tops to a green terrace about at a level with him and some. 50 paces distant along the hillside, shielded from the north by 3 or 4 great rowan trees on the far side of it, and on the terrace a little tarn or rock cistern of fair water, very cool and deep. He paused, steadying himself with his left hand by a jutting rock overgrown with rose campion. Surely no children of men were these, footing it on that secret lawn beside that fountain's brink, nor no creatures of mortal kind. Such it may be were the goats and kids, and soft-eyed does that on their hind legs merrily danced among them. But never such those others of manly shape, and with pointed hairy ears, shaggy legs, and cloven hooves, nor those maidens white of limb beneath the tread of whose feet the blue gentian and the little golden cinquefoil bent, not their blossoms, so airy light was their dancing. To make them music, little goat-footed children with long pointed ears sat on a hummock of turf-clad rock, piping on panpipes. Their bodies burnt to the hue of red earth by the wind and the sun. But whether because their music was too fine for mortal ears, or for some other reason, Grow might hear no sound of that piping. The heavy silence of the waste-white noon was lord of the scene, while the mountain nymphs and the simple genii of sedge and stream and crag and moorland solitude threaded the mazes of the dance. The Lord Grow stood still in great admiration, saying in himself, "What means my drowsy head to dream such fancies? Spirits of ill have I heretofore beheld in their manifestations. I have seen fantasticos framed and presented by art magic. I have dreamed strange dreams o' nights. But till this hour I did account it an idle tale of poets feigning that amid woods, forests, fertile fields, sea-coasts, shores of great rivers and fountain brinks, and also upon the tops of huge and high mountains, do still appear unto certain favoured eyes the sundry sorted nymphs and fieldish demigods. Which thing if I now verily behold, 'tis a great marvel, and sorteth well with the strange allurements whereby this oppressed land hath so lately found a means to govern mine affections." And he thought a while, reasoning thus in his mind, "If this be but an apparition, it hath no essence to do me a hurt. If, o' the contrary, these be very essential beings, needs must they joyfully welcome me, and use me well, being themselves the true vital spirits of many mountained demon land, unto whose comfort and the restorement of her old renown and praise I have with such a strange determination bent all my painful thoughts and resolution." So on the motion he discovered himself and hailed them. The wild things bounded away and were lost among the flanks of the hill. The capripeds, leaving on the instant their piping or their dancing, crouched, watching him with distrustful, startled eyes. Only the Oreads, still in a dazzling drift, pursued their round, quiet maiden mouths, beautiful breasts, slender, lithe limbs, hand joined to delicate hand, parting and closing and parting again, in rhythms of unstaled variety. Here one that, with white arms clasped behind her head, where her braided hair was as burnished gold, circled and swayed with a languorous motion, here another, that leaped and paused hovering a tiptoe, like an arrow of the sun shot through the leafy roof of an old pine forest, when the warm hill wind stirs the treetops, and opens a tiny window to the sky. Grow went toward them along the grassy hillside. When he was come a dozen paces, the strength was gone from his limbs. He kneeled down, crying out and saying, "Divinities of earth, deny me not, neither reject me, albeit cruelly have I till now oppressed your land, but will do so no more. The footsteps of mine overtrodden virtue lie still as bitter accusations unto me. Bring me of your mercy, where I may find out them that possess this land, and offer them atonement, who were driven forth because of me and mine to be outlaws in the woods and mountains." So spake he, bowing his head in sorrow. And he heard, like the trembling of a silver lute string, a voice in the air that cried, "North 'tis, and north 'tis. Why need we further?" He raised his eyes. The vision was gone. Only the noon and the woodland, silent, solitary, dazzling, were about and above him. Lord Grow came now to his horse again, and mounted and rode north away through the fells all that summer afternoon, full of cloudy fancies. When it was eventide, his way was high up along the steep side of a mountain between the screes and the grass, following a little path made by the wild sheep. Far beneath, in the valley, was a small river, tortuously flowing along a bouldery bed amid hillocks of old moraines, which were like waves of a sea of grass-clad earth. The July sun wheeled low, flinging the shadows of the hills far up the westward, facing slopes where Grow was a-riding, but where he rode, and above him the hillside was yet aglow with the warm, low sunshine, and the distant peak that shut in the head of the valley, rearing his huge front like the gable of a house, with sweeping ribs of bare rock and scree and a crest of crag, like a great breaker frozen to stone in mid-career, bathed yet in a radiance of opalescent light. Turning the shoulder of the hillside at a place where the hill was cut by a shallow gully, he saw before him a hollow or sheltered nook. There, protected by the great body of the hill from the blasts of the east and north, 2 rowan trees and some hollies grew in the clefts of the rock above the watercourse. Under their shadow was a cave, not large, but so big as a man might well abide in and be dry in wild weather, and beyond it on the right a little waterfall, so beautiful it was a wonder to behold. This was the fashion of it: a slab of rock, twice a man's height, tilted a little forward from the hill, so that the water fell clear from its upper edge in a thin stream into a rocky basin. The water in the basin was clear and deep, but a churn always with bubbles from the plunging jet from above, and over all the rocks about it grew mosses and lichens and little water flowers, nourished by the stream at root and refreshed by the spray. The Lord Grow said in his heart, "Here would I dwell for ever, had I but the art to make myself little as an eft. And I would build me an house a span high beside yonder cushion of moss emerald-hued, with those pink foxgloves to shade my door, which balance their bells above the foaming waters. This shy grass of Parnassus should be my drinking cup, with pure white chalice poised on a hair-thin stem, and the curtains of my bed that little thirsty sandwich which, like a green heaven sown with milk-white stars, curtains the shady sides of these rocks." Resting in this imagination, he abode long time looking on that fairy place, so secretly bestowed in the fold of the naked mountain. Then, unwilling to depart from so fair a spot, and bethinking him besides that after so many hours his horse was weary, he dismounted and lay down beside the stream. And in a short while, having his spirits sublimed with the sweet imagination of those wonders he had beheld, he was fain to suffer the long dark lashes to droop over his large and liquid eyes, and deep sleep overcame him. When he awoke, all the sky was afire with the red of sunset. A shadow was betwixt him and the western light, the shape of one bending over him, and saying in masterful wise, yet in accents wherein the echoes and memories of all sweet sounds seemed mingled and laid up at rest for ever, "Lie still, my lord, nor cry not a rescue. Behold, thine own sword, and I took it from thee sleeping." And he was ware of a sharp sword pointed against his throat, where the big veins lie beneath the tongue. He stirred not at all, neither spake aught, only looking up at her, as at some vision of delight strayed from the fugitive flock of dreams. The lady said, "Where be thy company, and how many? Answer me swiftly." He answered her like a dreamer, "How shall I answer thee? How shall I number them that be beyond all count? Or how name unto your grace their habitation, which are even very now closer to me than hand or feet? Yet of the next instant are able to transcend a main wider belike than even a starbeam hath journeyed o'er." She said, "Riddle me no riddles, answer me, thou wert best." "Madam," said Grow, "these that I told thee of be the company of mine own silent thoughts, and, but for mine horse, this is all the company that came hither with me." "Alone?" said she. "And sleep so securely in thine enemy's country?" That showed a strange confidence. "Not enemies, if I may," said he. But she cried, "And thou, Lord Grow, of which land?" "That one sickened long since," he answered, "of a mortal sickness, and 'tis now a day and a night since he is dead thereof." "What art thou then?" said she. He answered, "If your grace would so receive me, Lord Grow of Demonland." "A very practised turncoat," said she. "Belike they also are wearied of thee and thy ways." "Alas," she said in an altered voice, "thy gentle pardon! When doubtless it was for thy generous deeds to me, ward they fell out with thee, when thou didst so nobly befriend me. "I will tell your highness," answered he, "the pure truth. Never stood matters better twixt me and all of them than when yesternight I resolved to leave them." The Lady Mevrian was silent, a cloud in her face. "Then I am alone," she said. "Therefore think it not little-hearted in me, nor forgetful of past benefits. If I will be further certified of thee, ere I suffer thee to rise, swear to me thou wilt not betray me." But Gro said, "How should an oath from me avail thee, madam? Oaths bind not an ill man. Were I minded to do thee wrong, lightly should I swear thee all oaths thou mightest require, and likelier the next instant be forsworn." "That is not well said," said Mevrian, "nor helpeth not thy safety. You men do say that women's hearts be faint and feeble, but I shall show thee the contrary is in me. Study to satisfy me, else will I assuredly smite thee to death with thine own sword." The Lord Gro lay back, clasping his slender hands behind his head. "Stand, I pray thee," said he. "Oh, the other side of me, that I may see thy face." She did so, still threatening him with the sword. And he said, smiling, "Divine lady, all my days have I had danger for my bedfellow, and peril of death for my familiar friend, Quillam leading a delicate life in princely court, where murder sitteth in the wine-cup and in the alcove, Whilom journeying alone in more perilous lands than this, as witness the Moruna, where the country is full of venomous beasts and crawling poisoned serpents, and the divils be as abundant there as grasshoppers on a hot hillside in summer. He that feareth is a slave, were he never so rich, were he never so powerful. But he that is without fear is king of all the world. Thou hast my sword. Strike, death shall be a sweet rest to me. Thraldom, not death, should terrify me." She paused a while, then said unto him, "My lord Gro, thou didst do me once a right great good turn. Surely I may build my safety on this, that never yet did kite bring forth a good flying hawk." She shifted her hold on his sword, and very prettily gave it him hilt foremost, saying, "I give it thee back, my lord, nothing doubting that that which was given in honour thou wilt honourably use." But he, rising up, said, "Madam, this and thy noble words hath given such root-fastness to the pact of faith betwixt us, that it may now unfold what blossom of oaths thou wilt. For oaths are the blossom of friendship, not the root, and thou shalt find me a true holder of my vowed amity unto thee without spot or wrinkle. For sundry nights and days abode Gro and Mevrian in that place, hunting at whiles to get their sustenance, drinking of the sweet spring water, sleeping o' nights, she in her cave beneath the holly bushes and the rowans beside the waterfall, he in a cleft of the rocks a little below in the gully, where the moss made cushions soft and resilient as the great stuffed beds in Carquet. In those days she told him of her farings since that night of April, when she escaped out of Crothering, how first she found harbourage at By in Westmark, but hearing in a day or two of a hue and cry, fled east again, and sojourning a while beside Throwater, came at length about a month ago upon this cave beside the little fountain, and here abode. Her mind had been to win over the mountains to Galing, but she had after the first attempt given over that design, for fear of companies of the enemy whose hands she barely escaped when she came forth into the lower valleys that open on the eastern coast. Lands. So she had turned again to this hiding place in the hills, as secret and remote as any in Demonland. For this dale she let him know was Neverdale, where no road ran save the way of the deer and the mountain goats, and no garth opened on that dale, and the reek of no man's hearthstone burdened the winds that blew thither, and that gable-crested peak at the head of the dale was the southernmost of the forks of Nantreganon, nursery of the vulture and the eagle, and a hidden way was round the right shoulder of that peak, over the toothed ridge by Neverdale Horse to the upper waters of Tiveranderdale. On an afternoon of sultry summer heat, it so befell that they rested below the halls on a bastion of rock that jutted from the southwestern slope. Beneath their feet, precipices fell suddenly away from a giddy verge, sweeping round in a grand cirque, above which the mountain rose like some Tartarian fortress, ponderous, cruel as the sea, and sad, scarred and gashed with great lines of cleavage, as though the face of the mountain had been slashed away by the axe stroke of a giant. In the depths, the waters of Jewel Tarn slept placid and fathomless. Grow was stretched on the brink of the cliff, face downward, propped on his 2 elbows, studying those dark waters. "Surely," he said, "the great mountains of the world are a present remedy, if men did but know it, against our modern discontent and ambitions. In the hills is wisdom's fount. They are deep in time. They know the ways of the sun and the wind, the lightning's fiery feet, the frost that shattereth, the rain that shroudeth, the snow that putteth about their nakedness a softer coverlet than fine lawn, which, if their large philosophy question not if it be a bridal sheet or a shroud, hath not this unpoliced calm his justification ever in the returning year? And is it not an instance to laugh our carefulness out of fashion? Of us, little children of the dust, children of a day, who with so many burdens do burden us with taking thought, and with fears and desires and devious schemings of the mind, so that we wax old before our time, and fall weary ere the brief day be spent, and one reaping hook gather us home at last for all our pains." He looked up, and she met the gaze of his great eyes. Deep pools of night they seemed, where strange matters might move unseen, disturbing to look on, yet filled with a soft, slumberous charm that lulled and soothed. "Thou'st fallen a-dreaming, my lord," said Mevrian, "and for me, 'tis a hard thing to walk with thee in thy dreams, who am awake in the broad daylight, and would be a-doing." "Certes, it is an ill thing," said the old Grow, "that thou, who hast not been nourished in mendicity or poverty, but in superfluity of honour and largesse, shouldst be made fugitive in thine own dominions. To lodge with foxes and beasts of the wild mountain," said she, "it is yet a sweeter lodging than is to-day in Crothering. It is therefore I chafe to do somewhat. To win through to Galing, that was something." "What profit is in Galing?" said Grow, "without Lord Juss?" She answered, "Thou wilt tell me it is even as Crothering without my brother." Looking sidelong up at her, where she sat armed beside him, he beheld a tear, a tremble on her eyelid. He said gently, "Who shall foreknow the ways of fate? Your Highness is better here, belike." Lady Mevrian stood up. She pointed to a print in the living rock before her feet. "The hippogriff's hoof-mark," she cried, "stricken in the rock ages ago by that high bird which presideth from of old over the predestined glory of our line, to point us on to a fame advanced above the region of the glittering stars. True is the word that land which is in the governance of a woman only is not surely kept. I will abide idly here no more." Grow, beholding her so, stand all armed on that high brink of crag, setting with so much perfection in womanly beauty, manlike valour, bethought him that here was that true embodiment of morn and eve, that charm which called him from Crothering, and for which the prophetic spirits of mountain and wood and field had pointed his path with a heavenly benison, meaning to bid him go northward to his heart's true home. He kneeled down and caught her hand in his, embracing and kissing it as of her in whom all his hopes were placed, and saying passionately, "Mevrian, Mevrian, let me but be armed in thy good grace. and I defy whatever there is or can be against me. Even as the sun lighteth broad heaven at noonday, and that giveth light unto this dreary earth, so art thou the true light of Demonland, which because of thee maketh the whole world glorious. Welcome unto me be all miseries, so only unto thee I may be welcome." She sprang back, snatching away her hand. Her sword leapt, singing from the scabbard. But Grow, that was so ravished and abused that he remembered of nothing worldly, but only that he beheld his lady's face, abode motionless. She cried, "Back to back, swift, or 'tis too late." He leaped up, barely in time. 6 stout fellows, soldiers of Witchland, stolen softly upon them at unawares, closed now upon them. No breath to waste in parley, but the clank of steel. He and Mevrian back to back on a table of rock, those 6 setting on from either side. "Kill the goblin," said they. "Take the lady unhurt. 'Tis death to all, if she be touched." So for a time those 2 defended them of all their power. Yet at such odds could not the issue stand long in doubt, nor Grow's high metal make up what he lacked of strength bodily and skill in arms. Cunning of fence indeed was the Lady Mevrian, as they guessed not to their hurt, for the first of them, a great chuff-headed fellow that thought to bear her down with rushing in upon her, she with a deft thrust passing his guard, ran clean through the throat. By whose taking off, his fellows took some lesson of caution. But Grow, being at length brought to earth with many wounds, they had the next instant caught Mevrian from behind, whiles others engaged her in the face, when in the nick of time, as by the intervention of heaven, was all their business taken in reverse, and all 5 in a moment laid bleeding on the stones beside their fellows. Mevrian, looking about and seeing what she saw, fell weak and faint in her brother's arms, overcome with so much radiant joy after that stress of action and peril, beholding now with her own eyes that home-coming whereof the genii of that land had had foreknowledge, and in Grow's sight shown themselves wild with joy thereof. Brandoch, Daha, and Jus come, home to Demonland, like men arisen from the dead. "Not touched," she answered them. "But look to my lord, Grow, I fear he be hurt. Look to him well, for he hath approved him, our friend indeed."